The Apothecary Diaries Volume 14. Chapter 12, Life in the Medical Office by the Training Grounds. The palace grounds were more than big enough to host several medical offices, and the busiest among them was the one that stood near the soldiers' training grounds. "Hey! I've got a gaping wound in my head. Sew it up for me. My shoulder's dislocated. Pop it back in, would you?" One of the new recruits collapsed. "Got any smelling salts?" Such requests were the bread and butter of this office. Freshly minted physicians often found themselves assigned here for a baptism by fire. It was not somewhere they would send palace women who were assisting the medical office, at least not during their probationary period. There were too many rough customers around. It was, however, precisely where Dr. Liu assigned Mao Mao when she returned from the western capital. "At this point, I think it'll be good experience for you," he said. Maybe he was also hoping it would discourage the freak strategist from showing up all the time, as had been his wont at all Mao Mao's postings thus far. "If you have any trouble, just tell Dr. Li." There seemed to be all sorts of potential trouble in assigning a woman to a place with so many roughnecks. Dr. Li had openly opposed the idea of having Mao Mao come with them to the western capital, but it had been clear that this had been out of concern for her. Dr. Liu seemed confident that Dr. Li would look out for her, even in this most rough and tumble of medical offices. "Yes, just let me know if any problems arise," said Dr. Li, who, unlike at first, now seemed to regard Mao Mao with respect. Dr. Li's actually a pretty good guy, Mao Mao thought. He could be a bit hard-headed, but he was also dedicated and resolute. Not to mention that these days, you could see his muscles even under his physician's uniform. It was getting harder and harder to tell whether he was a doctor or a soldier. "Then again, I don't think anyone there will give you any grief, even if you don't specifically come to me for help." Word had it that a specter with a monocle was forever looming just behind Mao Mao. Mao Mao had probably been chosen for this assignment over Yao and NN, who were quite capable, regardless perhaps of their personalities, because she seemed the least likely to get in any trouble. So it was that she found herself in a rather wild workplace. Today, like every day, was busy, with urgent patients pouring in starting first thing in the morning. "Goodness, what a lot of commotion for such an early hour," one of the upper physicians chortled. He was an older man with a gentle demeanor and a bushy bundle of facial hair. He'd been on duty here the night before, and was sitting on one of the patient cots to eat his breakfast. One wondered whether he was really safe here in this place full of ruffians, but one didn't have to see him at work for long to realize he was very good at his job. "I'm going to go get changed. Go ahead and take a look at the cases," he said to Mao Mao. "Yes, sir." Mao Mao and Dr. Li were on morning duty. Maybe the other doctors had something else to occupy them on this shift, for they would be starting work in the afternoon. "Excuse me. This guy got a wooden training sword stuck in his belly. Can you do something about it?" asked a soldier who had brought someone in. Of all the questions Mao Mao had thought she might hear that morning, this hadn't been one of them. "A wooden training sword in his belly?" she asked. She and Dr. Li looked at the man who had been carted in. Setting aside the mystery of how in the world this had happened, he clearly needed treatment. Ugh, ugh," the man groaned. He was a young soldier, he couldn't have been more than 20. He was crying out and sweating copiously. "Can you tell me exactly what happened?" Mao Mao asked, not of the patient, who was in no condition to talk, but of the soldiers who had brought him in. "I think it's pretty obvious. He got hurt during training." "What the hell else could it be?" one of them said. Then they all made their way smartly out of the office. Talk about irresponsible. "What's their problem?" Dr. Li grumbled, but he quickly turned to treating the patient. About the same time, the old physician with the facial hair trotted out, evidently having changed. "He appears to have a broken wood sword in his belly," said Mao Mao. That might have seemed perfectly obvious, but there was a reason for how she said it, not that the sword had pierced him and broken off, but that it had already been broken when he took the blow. Dr. Li and the old doctor both understood what she was getting at and nodded. There were a lot of questions about how a broken sword ended up in a man's abdomen in the course of training. Had he simply fallen on top of a broken sword by chance? It seemed much more likely that someone had stabbed him with it. Let's get ready to do surgery. You two, clean his wounds, the old doctor said, taking some implements off a big shelf. Mao Mao and Dr. Li transferred the patient to a cot and stripped off his shirt to reveal the wound. We'll need to start by getting out the splinters, Mao Mao said. She could take out the biggest ones by hand, but they were mired in clotting blood and hard to remove. The smaller splinters, she pulled out delicately with a pair of hair tweezers. He's doing a lot of bleeding. We've got to do something about that, Dr. Li said, then wrapped several bandages tightly around the man's belly. It was a basic technique for stanching blood, all but bury the affected area, applying pressure to it. It's going to be hard for him to heal with his skin in tatters like this, Mao Mao observed. A good, clean cut would have been preferable. We cut off the excess skin and then sew him up. The question is how to do the closure. If they simply tried to connect one side to the other, it might not be long enough and the skin would stretch. They had to work with the wounded flesh to help it connect more readily. Sometimes that involved making a new incision. You think his internal organs are okay? The old doctor asked, returning with the surgical tools. Judging by the amount of blood, I would say the wound isn't too deep, Dr. Li responded. Dr. Li and I will handle the sewing, the old doctor said to Mao Mao. You keep the bleeding down and get us any medicines we need. Yes, sir. Will you be using anesthetic for this little scrape? Pfey. Despite his genial looks, the old doctor turned out to be quite merciless with his patients. Mao Mao felt for the young man, but it was hardly an unusual sight among the soldiers. The doctors frequently chose to forego anesthetic after all. These men might find themselves on the battlefield one day. They had better be used to pain. All right, which herbs have coagulant effects? Common horsetail, mugwort, narrow-leaf cattail. There were some animal products with similar effects, including donkey hide gelatin, which was, well, exactly what it sounded like. There should be plenty of all of that right now. Some herbs were harder to get at certain times of year, but from early spring through summer, they were comparatively abundant, which was a boon for the medical staff. In the next room, another doctor had returned from a different job and set about helping Dr. Li and the old doctor. Cutting and sewing without anesthetic frequently resulted in a lot of thrashing, for which purpose the surgical table was designed with ties for the arms and legs. They must have put a gag in the man's mouth to keep him from biting his tongue, because Mao Mao heard only muffled screaming. Mao Mao was going to serve in this assignment for a while, and she assumed that eventually Yao and NN would find their way here as well. NN's probably going to be all right, but Yao? Yao had guts, true enough, but Mao Mao couldn't help wondering if she could really stomach this. She was equally concerned about their two new junior assistants. It would be a shame to scare them off by giving them such ugly work, but then again, they couldn't be babied either. Mao Mao contemplated the future as she brought the medicines to the doctors. The actual sewing of the wound seemed to have been taken care of fairly quickly. The floor was strewn with bloody bandages, and the poor young soldier getting sewn up had wet himself. That was hardly unusual. In fact, the medical office kept a supply of fresh underpants and trousers on hand for that very reason. Mao Mao left a change of clothes on the shelf along with the medicines. Will this do for herbs? She asked. In addition to the coagulants, she'd brought antiseptics, painkillers, and antipyretics. Yes, good work. The old doctor daubed some coagulant onto the freshly sewn wound and wrapped a bandage around it. Dr. Li, if you two could transfer the patient from the surgical table to a cot? And Mao Mao. Let's see. Help clean up the bandages and tools. Yes, sir. Mao Mao started tossing the filthy bandages into a basket. You know how to boil the tools to disinfect them? If so, I'd like you to go ahead and take care of it. Yes, sir. The old doctor seemed like quite a polite person. Mao Mao was grateful that he was willing to give specific instructions. There were plenty of people in the world who insisted that others should use their own brains to figure out what to do, then got angry when people didn't do what they expected. The patients might behave badly, but there were a great many talented physicians. Maybe that was because the old doctor himself seemed to have it together so well. Mao Mao decided her current posting wasn't bad at all. Except, of course, for the fact that the freak strategist was never far away. The parade of patients continued. Only when the sun was getting low in the sky did Mao Mao finally have a chance to rest. Ironically, it was precisely thanks to the fact that a monocled freak had begun to appear in the corners of their vision. Say, Mao Mao, Dr. Li said, looking from her to the freak and back. Please don't say it, Dr. Li. Mao Mao was preparing tea. The old doctor must have finally caught a break himself, because he was sipping a cup of hot tea and breathing a sigh of relief. Quite a day today, eh? As always, he said. Yes, sir. I learned a lot. Dr. Li, you truly do seem like a different person since you got back. Dr. Li, with muscles built on a diet of soybean powder and goat's milk, still appeared to be bursting with energy, like he could have gone on without a rest. Then the old doctor went on, I must say, though, things have seemed awfully strange with the military lately. Mao Mao thought for a second about whether she should say anything, then asked, Strange, sir? You mean the number of not-so-accidental injuries? Dr. Li nodded along with her. The two of them hadn't been there very long, but even they had already noticed there were a lot of unusual wounds. I see it hasn't been lost on you too. No. Ahem. That man with the wooden sword in his belly today, well, it was hard to see it as anything but an intentional stabbing, said Dr. Li, voicing exactly what Mao Mao wanted to say. Do you think there's some particularly brutal hazing going on? The soldiers who had brought the injured man to the office had scuttled out again with hardly a word of explanation. Very fishy. You'd think they would have been a bit more respectful of their colleague. Hazing? I think it's factional strife. Factional strife? Mao Mao and Dr. Li echoed. They gave tilts of their heads, then glanced at the suspicious figure looming behind them. Yes, my dear Mao Mao. What is it? The freak strategist grinned openly. Mao Mao ignored him and turned back to the old doctor. Perhaps we could say it's essentially a turf war among the rank and file, he said. What makes you say that? Dr. Li asked, furrowing his brow. In nature, having a big apex predator at the top of the food chain can determine the power dynamics among its prey. Yes. Mao Mao and Dr. Li glanced back again. But that predator has been gone for a whole year, so the prey started to fight over the feeding grounds. Yes, sir. The old doctor hadn't used any names, but his point couldn't have been more clear. Prey are prey, but they're not all the same species. While the predator was away, the prey who got stronger became the one who eats the other prey. And those who have gone over to that side feel they can do whatever they want, as we've seen, Mao Mao said. Precisely. That's frustrating, but won't it sort itself out eventually? I'd like to think so. Yes, one can hope. Now that the apex predator, namely the freak strategist, was back, one might expect things to return to their original order, but the old doctor didn't seem quite so sure. Mao Mao crossed her arms. That reminds me. It made her think of something the patriarch of the Yu clan had said. It seems the new faction in the army doesn't like me much at all. Did that have something to do with this? Is there something bothering you, sir? Dr. Li said, voicing the question that the old physician seemed to want them to ask. You're probably going to hear about this anyway, so I might as well tell you. The military is currently divided into two major blocks: the Empress Dowager's family, and the Empress's family. The Empress's family would be the Gyako clan. This was presumably the new faction to which the patriarch had referred. Then again, I suppose you could say there are 3 factions, if you include the neutral group that aligns itself with neither side, the old physician said. HRK. Mao Mao involuntarily made a strange noise. The old doctor was looking at her and the freak strategist who secretly watched them. That's very, said Mao Mao. A lot of trouble, isn't it? Do you see, then, what I'm trying to tell you? The old doctor looked straight at Mao Mao. We need you to wrangle that predator as well as you can, to spare us even a little of the chaos we now find ourselves in. Mao Mao didn't say anything, but, quite without meaning to, she gave the world's biggest frown. Chapter 13, A Duel and Its Price. The factional strife in the military divisions continued in the following days. At first, Mao Mao couldn't grasp what the Empress faction and Empress Dowager faction even were. After serving days and days near the training ground, however, she couldn't have avoided the talk if she'd wanted to. The Empress of the Empress faction was, needless to say, Empress Gyakuyo. Not that the faction had formed at her instigation, of course, but her father Gyakan was involved. One by one, relatives of hers from the western capital had begun to fill positions at court. Moreover, up-and-coming bureaucrats and soldiers from the provinces, along with relatively newly named families, began to lend their support to Gyakan, until as a whole they were being referred to as a new faction. The opposing Empress Dowager faction was focused around Anshi's family. The family of the Empress Dowager had long filled the higher bureaucratic positions, but had never been paid much attention. Why not? Because the former emperor or, more to the point, the Empress Regnant had never much liked them. This was not to say that the Empress Dowager was smitten with her family. How could she trust the parents who had sent her as a little girl into the rear palace of an emperor who preferred little girls? However, the Empress Dowager's faction included Grand General Lu. Formerly a soldier, he had protected the young Empress Dowager and the current emperor, rising quickly through the ranks. Unlike Anshi's family, he had also had the favor of the Empress Regnant, which counted for much. Many of the houses of long standing, which didn't care much for this upstart new faction, aligned themselves with the Empress Dowager's people. In order to decrease friction among the factions, Lu was promoted from Grand Marshal to Grand General at the same time as the Gyaku were made a named clan. Whatever the case, while the bigwigs might be maneuvering carefully and cautiously, the same was not true of the youth on the training ground. Their skirmishes continued unabated. Furthermore, each of the factions backed different candidates for the next emperor. The Empress's faction, naturally, supported Empress Gyakuyo's son, the current heir apparent. The Empress Dowager's faction, meanwhile, did not look kindly upon an heir with so much Western blood in his veins, especially not when Li Hua had a little boy of the same age. No doubt they also disliked the fact that the imperial younger brother, who had been the heir apparent for so many years, had been shuffled aside. The imperial younger brother would be the Empress Dowager's son, whereas the heir apparent is the Empress Dowager's grandson. He'd be closer in terms of blood, making him that much easier to justify as part of the government. Mao Mao, who knew the truth of the imperial younger brother, could only try to keep her face utterly expressionless at the idea. As for the neutral faction, well, she would leave them out of the discussion entirely. Mao Mao didn't understand politics. All she could do was focus on the work in front of her. Hey! We have an emergency, someone shouted. Mao Mao decided to leave her inventory of the medicine cabinet for later. There were so many similar emergency cases, she felt like she was doing the same thing every day. The patient this time had bruises between his chest and abdomen from being beaten, pale, purplish blotches caused by internal bleeding. He was a young man, still in his early 20s. I've seen him somewhere before, Mao Mao thought, squinting at the man. Just recently, it seemed to her. She could almost place him, but it wasn't quite coming to her. It looks like he tried to hold out longer than he should have, she said. Yes, ma'am, the man with the patient answered with rather unsoldierly politeness. He put up with it for quite a while. Well, now, who's this guy? Mao Mao also thought she remembered the smiling young soldier. Master Ujun, she said. He was Li Shu's half-brother, whom the patriarch of the Yu clan had chosen to make an example of. At your service, milady of the Law clan. I'm honored that you remembered my name, but I'm forbidden from using the character Yu. Please, just call me Jun. He was acting very humble. Mao Mao looked at Ujun and thought back to the meeting of the named some days before. Wait. He's that guy. The injured man was the one who had attached himself to Yao, the love letter writer of indeterminate name. At the meeting, he had been done in by Lahan's brother, so who had worked him over this time? Ugh! Mr. Love Letters groaned. Bruises like those hurt worse as time went on, but the noise he was making suggested something more than just bruising. His ribs, Dujun said on behalf of Mr. Love Letters, who could only make pained noises. Are they broken? Cracked, maybe. He did get sent flying quite a distance. That much was obvious, and Mao Mao suspected Ujun had not been the one to do it. What did he get hit with? These marks don't look like they came from a wooden training sword. No, it was a bare hand. An empty hand? Of what? A bear. The bruises were so vicious that even the normally stone-faced Dr. Li cracked a joke about it. Mao Mao blinked in spite of herself. She decided to let Dr. Li handle the initial treatment. She went to get bandages to secure the collarbone and a cold compress to reduce the swelling. If there was damage to the internal organs, they would need surgical tools too. How's he look? She asked Dr. Li as she returned to the cot. He seems to have just avoided any internal damage, although of course we'll keep an eye on his progress. Help me restrain him. What should we do to cool the patient? With an imperial family member one might be able to afford ice, but that would be a luxury for a wounded soldier. They might get chilly well water if they were lucky. Get a rag ready. But first, we need some painkillers. Dr. Li was evidently going to prioritize setting the bone over cooling the body. Yes, sir. Despite having awakened to his muscularity in the Western capital, Dr. Li was an eminently sensible practitioner. The way he studied the patient without muss or fuss was practically pleasant to watch. Mr. Love Letters appeared not to have any internal injuries and was taking his medicine obediently. The one thing he couldn't do was explain the circumstances of his injury. Did he get hurt while he was training? Mao Mao asked. Yes, well, after a manner of speaking, Dujun replied evasively. Mao Mao was surprised, in fact, to find him there among the soldiers. One might have described him as gentle or, less generously, as soft, and he was far smaller than Dr. Li. There was a bit of an argument, you see, and they decided to settle it with fisticuffs. A duel, Mao Mao figured. Mr. Love Letters does like his duels. He seemed to have a certain confidence in his skills, but he was very poor at picking his opponents. Settle it? My ass, Mr. Love Letters grunted amidst his groans, his voice thick. That man is a monster. Breaking a wooden sword with his bare hands. His bare hands? Mao Mao cocked her head inquisitively. That story sounded familiar. Who was it? She was about to ask who had done it, but Dr. Li got there first. Just what on earth could you have been arguing about? He demanded. Depending on the circumstances, they might have to report it to the higher UPS. Recently, there had been a great many injuries on account of factional strife, and they would have to make a written report if it had happened again. It was really nothing much, Dujun said with a pained look. This, however, incensed Mr. Love Letters. What are you calling nothing much? His stomach still hurt, though, and the moment he made this outburst, he clutched his abdomen where he'd been hit. You don't care if somebody mocks your own sister, he continued. No, for I've told myself that whatever anyone may say of Lady Li Shu at this point, it's nothing to do with me. In fact, I should think it would be rather more disagreeable to her if anyone should think I was related to her. I get it. Someone insulted a friend's sister, and you got angry and challenged the ruffian to a duel, said Dr. Lee, looking to Mr. Love Letters to see if this was right. No, sir, not quite, Dujun said. It was Master Yuen here who insulted my half-sister. Another soldier who happened to be passing by got upset, started a fight over it, and Yuen lost. Evidently, Mr. Love Letters' real name was Yuen. As there was no need for Mao Mao to remember it, however, she expected she would forget. Excuse me. Dr. Lee said, cocking his head. Mao Mao imitated him, and tried to summarize the situation. Let me see if I've got this straight. First, your little sister was insulted. Yes, ma'am, said Ujun. And you were the one who insulted her. Yes, Mr. Love Letters replied. Meanwhile, a completely separate third party who happened to be walking by got angry, a duel cum brawl started, and you got hurt. And the guy whose sister you insulted brought you here. Uh-huh. Mao Mao and Dr. Lee both looked quizzical again. Don't you think you're a little too forgiving? Mao Mao said, looking at Ajun. I shouldn't say so. The Shin and Yu clans have finally reconciled. I can't let them come to grief again because of me. In other words, he wouldn't let a member of the Shin clan, even one like this, go abandoned, even if that person had also insulted Li Shu. I wonder what his clan leader would make of that. Perhaps in reaction to all that had happened, the Yu leader seemed to dote on Li Shu. He might even have preferred if Ujun had left Mr. Love Letters to his fate for insulting her. We'll need to at least know who it was that hurt you, said Dr. Lee. Sen, Mr. Love Letters mumbled. Come again. I said, Basin, he answered, not sounding very happy. Master Basin did this. Mao Mao asked, but even as she spoke it made sense. Mr. Love Letters' wounds were severe, but coming from Basin, it was understandable. In fact, you're lucky he didn't burst any of your organs, she muttered. She looked back almost fondly on the way he had snapped those bandits' arms like twigs in the western capital. Further back in her memory, there was the time he had broken a lion's nose. He'd probably tried not to use his full strength as best he could today, but he'd still broken several ribs and Mr. Love Letters was lucky it hadn't been worse. Wah! I defended against his blow with a wooden sword, and look. The sword is broken, and I've got cough. Cough. Mr. Love Letters still wasn't in good enough shape to be shouting like that. I know he lost to Lahan's brother, but he did know his way around a fight, more or less. Mr. Love Letters could be a questionable human being, but he certainly knew how to handle himself. Dr. Lee cinched down the bandages even tighter, as if to instruct Mr. Love Letters not to talk. He fought a bear masquerading as a man. Bad luck. A person who encountered a bear was fortunate just to live to tell the tale. They should probably be applauding the fact that he was alive at all. I'm actually impressed you were able to duel Master Basin. But I would have thought his strength and power were well known to the other soldiers. When Master Basin duels other soldiers, he often does it at a handicap. He fights barehanded, unless his opponent is a particularly capable fighter, Dujun explained. A monster indeed. The other day, Mr. Love Letters had been beaten by a farmer. Today, a barehanded opponent. His pride must have been in tatters. He'd done it to himself, though, so Mao Mao had scant sympathy. Instead she set about preparing painkillers, but she didn't hurry. Once they were done treating Mr. Love Letters, Dujun left again, politely giving Mr. Love Letters his shoulder to lean on. Mao Mao watched the people-pleasing young man go, then returned to the medical office, where Dr. Lee heaved a sigh. This is getting to be a lot of trouble, he said. How so, sir? Dr. Lee scratched his head. The fighting amongst the soldiers has gotten bad recently, right? The higher UPS have instructed us to get the story from both sides, the injured party and the person who inflicted the injury. Even if it was just a training incident. Well, we just heard one side. Where's the problem? If Li Shu had been the source of the argument, it was understandable why Basin had gotten involved. I like to think I understand something about Master Basin, at least a little bit, Mao Mao said. I suspect he could never have ignored a slight against a young woman, let alone a former high consort. Mao Mao put this in the way that seemed the most discreet. In fact, Basin was in love with Li Shu, and his sister had even worked on the Yu clan to bring up the possibility of marriage, but there was no need to tell an outsider like Dr. Li all of that. We'll still have to write it up, but, Master Basin, huh? We can't exactly bring him in for an interview, said the doctor. Mao Mao didn't respond, but she had a thought. Her personal impression of Basin wasn't that frightening. He was the son of the diligent lover of all things cute, Gao Shun, and very much cowed by his father as well as by his mother, and his older sister, and meanwhile his sister-in-law teased him relentlessly. He could be like a bear in a man's clothing, charging straight ahead, but if you didn't bother him, he wouldn't bother you. So why does Dr. Li look like he's bracing himself for disaster? Mao Mao might be puzzled, but all most people saw of Basin was that he was one of the elite who served the imperial younger brother. Do you really think I should be talking to him directly? Dr. Li said. Come to think of it, Dr. Li didn't have much contact with Master Basin. During their time in the western capital, Dr. Li had mostly been at the clinic. Basin had visited the place once, but had been acting on behalf of Jinchi, who was supposedly there to comfort the patients. As Jinchi's representative, Basin had been effectively playing the part of an imperial family member, so it was understandable that Dr. Li might want to keep his distance. Okay, so he probably didn't seem as approachable as usual that day. I don't think you have to worry so much about him, Mao Mao offered. If you tell him it's a work matter, he won't twist your arm off or anything. If he's apt to twist anyone's arm off, let's give him Tianyu. Tianyu? Master Basin might twist his head off, Mao Mao replied. Dr. Li made the funniest jokes sometimes, she thought, but his eyes weren't laughing. In general, the only people who can speak to members of a named clan on equal terms are high-level bureaucrats or other named clan folk, Dr. Li said. But didn't you comport yourself with considerable authority towards those two earlier, Doctor? True, the young men might not have actually held the characters Yu or Shin, but they were members of named clans nonetheless. Whether or not they come from distinguished families, when I'm providing medical treatment, I outrank them. Dr. Lu always tells us, remember? Never let a patient think they can take you lightly when they're under your care. That was good advice, Mao Mao acknowledged. You couldn't let yourself be scared off of giving appropriate medical treatment just because a layperson gave you grief about it. Nonetheless, I can't believe the way that boy acted. I've heard that the Yu clan's status has nosedived since Lady Li Shu left the rear palace, but still to take such an attitude even toward Master Basin, Dr. Li sighed as he cleaned up their tools. He might be brawny now, but he was still very dedicated, and could be quite sympathetic to people. He was a hard worker himself, albeit in a slightly different way from Gao Shun. If you'll pardon my asking, sir, are you married? Mao Mao said, hoping the question was not too abrupt. No, but I am betrothed. My parents chose the match. I see, sir. That's too bad. Empress Gyakuyo's chief lady-in-waiting, Hong Niang, was older than Dr. Li, but still a perfect match in Mao Mao's opinion, but she wouldn't even get to bring it up. And you think Master Basin has more than just physical challenges standing against him? Yet. The Ma clan serve the imperial family directly as bodyguards. Instead of having formal ranks, they simply always serve their masters. But some fools confuse having no rank for having no talent, and try to start fights with them. Sounds like such fools would be lucky to get away with some broken ribs. They could end up with a broken head, Mao Mao said as she put the last of the bandages in the cabinet. Dr. Li was proving quite voluble today. Dr. Li, she said. She watched as the physician got out some paper to write his report. He tried to slide it toward her. It seemed to be an attempt to just happen to let her see what was written there, but Dr. Lee wasn't cut out for these little charades. Is it possible, sir, that you don't want to go interview Master Basin in order to write your report? Well, no, it's not that, Dr. Lee said, but he couldn't quite bring himself to look Mao Mao in the eye. Are you scared to visit Master Basin, sir? Well, you know, if my work demanded it, I would go. He didn't sound very eager, however. Mao Mao clapped her hands. If you ordered me to, sir, I could go on your behalf. Oh. You would do that? He sounded like he'd thought she would never ask. If she had been dealing with anyone else, Mao Mao might have tried to wring a few extra favors out of them for this, but this was Dr. Lee. She already owed him quite a bit, she could do this for him. But of course, sir, she said. Once in a while, even Mao Mao could simply, earnestly do as she was asked. Once in a while. Chapter 14, Two Good Friends. Basin's job was to be Jinchi's bodyguard. That meant he was typically to be found in Jinchi's office, but today was different. If I remember right, once every few days he spends a day training. And since he'd brutalized an opponent this morning, today was probably that day. At least as long as his superiors haven't summoned him for anything. Mao Mao headed to the training area, where she found a crowd of sweaty, smelly guys. They must have just been on break, because they were wiping away sweat with handkerchiefs and swigging water from bamboo flasks. Many were topless, and a few were wearing only a pair of underpants. It was hardly an unusual sight for Mao Mao, and she passed by without paying them much mind. When she'd told Dr. Lee that she was going to the training grounds, he'd given her a look as if to ask, "Want me to come with you?" But she'd turned him down. They couldn't leave the medical office completely unattended, and anyway, the soldiers weren't likely to try anything with her. Much as Mao Mao hated to be thought of as a blood relation of the freak strategist, she had to admit that it had fringe benefits at times. For example, even the bulliest soldiers typically treated her with respect. As long as there was no one truly ignorant here, nobody would lay a hand on her. All right, so it's not exactly fair. But Mao Mao was small and weak. She had to make use of the tools she had, or she would never survive. As the soldiers caught sight of Mao Mao, they murmured and craned their necks, but soon looked away disappointed, or with better be careful expressions. Those would be the ones assigned under the freak. In point of fact, Mao Mao was perfect for Dr. Lee's request. The freak strategist tended to wander into work just after noon, and he often stopped by the medical office to kill some time. If bumping into that old fart was the alternative, then Mao Mao was just as happy to be sent on an errand among the sweat and the reek. Although most of the soldiers were taking a rest, there was one energetic fight going on. It involved one very large soldier and one comparatively small one. It turned out to be Lihaku and Basin. The two were armed with wooden training swords and small shields. From the sweat pouring down their faces, it looked like they'd been at it for a while. In spite of the heat, they were clad in leather armor so as to protect themselves. It certainly looks like Basin is at a disadvantage here. Even Mao Mao, who knew nothing of the martial arts, could tell the difference in size was just too great. Lihaku was some 192 centimeters tall, against Basin's 171 or so. And yet, I guess it's a good match? Basin easily blocked Lihaku's sword, catching it with his shield and letting it slide away from him. As Lihaku brought his sword up again, Basin swung at him. Lihaku, not to be outdone, likewise blocked the blow with his shield. I knew Lihaku was strong, too, but this. Against the bear in a man's clothing, this man who looked like a bear was holding his own. He must be quite strong indeed. Mao Mao couldn't follow the niceties of what they were doing, but she saw that they were using not just their hands but their feet to control the situation, their torsos moving constantly as a distraction. Lihaku might look like a muscle brain, but he had quick wits. He didn't simply trust to his size to help him dominate opponents, but had obviously cultivated real skill as well. Then again, the size difference between them should have been a decisive disadvantage for Basin. The way he made it seem like it didn't exist was absolutely fearsome. Normally you'd expect the little guy to be the one who's full of fancy tricks, Mao Mao thought. Here, however, Li Haku was the one with refined style. Basin simply laid on with his strength. That was not to say that Basin was completely without technique, of course, only that he was a monster, making up for what he lacked in size with sheer muscle. A person would never get to be like him without being born that way and then working on unique ways of building muscle. Drink some darn water. Have some salt. Mao Mao found a patch of shade nearby and sat down. A few soldiers looked at her but kept their distance. Finally one of them asked, "Can we help you?" Mao Mao suspected she had seen him before, probably several times. She didn't remember his name, of course, but his deferential tone suggested he was being polite to her. "Oh, don't mind me," she said. "Very well, ma'am." Mao Mao drank some tea she had brought. She was ready to wait for a while if she had to. From the folds of her robe she also produced crunchy rice crackers for a snack. Doesn't look like they're going to be done anytime soon. Better to be ready with a drink and something salty. She assumed the combatants had something to drink, but she set some of the rice crackers aside so she could share them. She was just settling in to observe the fight when someone approached her. It was a soldier, still young. "What's a court lady doing here?" he growled. The other men appeared distraught. "Looks like someone here doesn't know the story." Mao Mao looked up at them, in fact, for the man was with two companions. He scowled openly at her. "This is no place for a girl to come have a picnic," he said. "Or do you think you're here to fish up a man for yourself? With those looks, I assume not." The two men flanking the young soldier laughed. From the way other soldiers nearby looked lost for what to do, Mao Mao concluded this young man must be fairly high-ranking. "I'm almost sure I've seen him before," she thought, but she couldn't remember where. Had he come to the medical office at some point? Or maybe he'd been at the meeting of the named. Given that neither of them seemed to actually know who the other was, this must be their first proper meeting. Mao Mao stood up and patted the dust off her behind. "Please accept my apologies. I'm here on an errand from the master physician. If I'm in your way, I'll gladly move somewhere else." She was about to leave, but the young man grabbed her shoulder. "Hold it." "Yes, sir." Mao Mao braced herself, convinced that the soldier was about to start something. That was when a wooden training sword came spinning through the air, arcing up and then down before planting itself in the ground. "Oh. Gosh, guess that's it for me." It was Li Haku, holding up his hands. He wiped the sweat off his face and heaved a great sigh. "I think we should call it there, my good Basin." Basin didn't say anything, but he still looked slightly dissatisfied. "Oh. If it isn't the young lady." "Hello, there." Li Haku called, waving, when he noticed Mao Mao. Did he really lose, or did he decide to lose after he spotted me? Or maybe he was letting Basin save face. It didn't really matter which it was. Li Haku and Basin, both still dripping with sweat, came over to Mao Mao. "Hey there, little lady. What's going on? You won't find your father, Grand Commandant Kan, anywhere around here." At the name of the freak strategist, the young soldier quailed. Grand Commandant Kan. Much as Mao Mao felt a little sick doing it, she put a smile on her face. Li Haku himself normally referred to the freak strategist as the old fart. He'd used the man's proper name now only to make sure this young soldier knew who he was dealing with. "It looks like you were having a conversation with this court lady. Have you said all you want to say?" Basin asked. Still sweating, he undid the ties of his armor and took it off. The leather produced an overpowering stench even at a distance. "Oh, I wasn't saying much of anything at all," the young man said, and he and his friends retreated, as quickly and as cleanly as a trio of fleeing hares. "Humph! There's more and more of that going on recently. It's trouble, Basin said as the sweat dripped down his face. What are you doing in a filthy place like this, little lady? Lee Haku asked, looking genuinely concerned. He seemed to be warning her that she couldn't always count on him to be there to protect her. I've come to interview Master Basin about this morning's events, Mao Mao said. Interview? Something happen? Lee Haku asked. You don't know. Mao Mao replied. She wasn't eager to have to explain to him what had gone on. I was on desk duty all morning, he said. Turns out you have to do more and more of it when you get promoted. Mao Mao nodded, that made sense. Lee Haku, she gathered, had risen in the ranks once again since returning from the western capital with the imperial younger brother. It was no big deal, Basin said. A soldier who had been in a fight with Master Basin was brought to the medical office. He had severe bruises and a cracked rib. Lately, there have been many more duels such as they are. An extension of the factional strife among the soldiers. Because this is such a burden for the medical office, we're now required to talk to both the patient and the person who injured him about the circumstances of the injuries. There. Now, if you would kindly cooperate. Mao Mao finished the entire taxing explanation in a single breath. Wow! That does sound like a pain, Lee Haku groaned, even as he continued to dab at his sweat. Mao Mao offered him a rice cracker, which he took eagerly and seemed to quite enjoy. It was nothing unusual, Basin said. I just met a soldier who had gotten his position on nothing but the strength of his family background, and I gave him a little training. It's like those guys earlier. There are a lot of people here who are foxes borrowing the wrath of the tiger. They have no real skill of their own, but they're always happy to make up some excuse to attack an opponent. It also irks me how they think they can find strength in numbers. This appeared to be Basin's opinion of factional conflict. It's certainly true that the young man seemed full of himself. When you could do as you pleased so long as you found a plausible reason, it was all too easy to go off the deep end. Your training is rough stuff, I don't doubt. Even I could barely catch my breath. Going after some pampered kid who's hardly known trouble in the world seems like overkill, Lee Haku said. I held back on him. I fought him barehanded, just like I always do. A bear holding back is still enough to kill a person, Mao Mao said. You think so? Interestingly, these two seem to be pretty good friends. She didn't know whether that was because they were both the bodybuilding type, or because Lee Haku was such an accomplished reader of other people's thoughts and feelings. Much as she was sorry to interrupt this moment of bonhomie, Mao Mao had work to do. I heard the fight started when someone insulted Lady Li Shu, she said. Basin flinched, he looked away and appeared shaken all over again. Well, Lee Haku said, grinning at him. That true, buddy? Ahem, yes, it is, but so what? Lady Li Shu is a direct descendant of the Yu clan, not to mention she served among the very highest consorts, even if she no longer does so. Why must she suffer people to say she's a vamp who was driven out of the rear palace for Uncha's titty? Gosh, is that what he said? Mao Mao asked. Dujun and Mr. Love Letters had certainly softened that part of the story. Lady Li Shu was guilty of nothing except being at the mercy of those around her. Why should she endure such slander? Basin stamped on the ground. So first there was an argument, then it turned into a fight, Mao Mao said. That's right. If I did anything wrong, it was that I had him wear leather armor instead of metal. You had him put armor on and you still cracked a rib. He really was a monster, Mao Mao saw. As they listened to Basin talk, the three of them moved to an open-air pavilion. She needed some kind of table so she could write. What makes me madder than anything, though, is that guy Dujun. He's supposed to be Lady Li Shu's family, but he just stood there grinning. It's because you have guys like him standing around to see how the wind blows that the other guys get bolder. Even seated on the stone stool, Basin's mood did not improve. Okay, buddy. Here, have one of these. Lee Haku tossed a rice cracker into Basan's mouth. He looked shocked for a moment, but didn't spit it out. Instead, he started chewing. They definitely get along. Mao Mao didn't really need Lee Haku for anything, but he'd come with them anyway. Actually, it was helpful. She might have had trouble wrangling Basan on her own. Dujun probably couldn't say anything under the circumstances, Lee Haku said. If he's not careful, a bunch of hot-blooded soldiers will turn him into a punching bag. The weak learn that sometimes you have to toady to get by. You're standing up for that coward? Basan asked, glaring at Lee Haku. Well, his glare was more of a pout at this point. He wasn't really angry. You know Master Ajun, Master Lee Haku? Mao Mao asked. He does technically serve under me. He got stuck here even though he was originally in the civil service. I mean, after his family fell. No wonder he looks so feeble. Dujun wasn't a bean sprout, exactly, but seemed more suited to holding a brush than a sword. Right? Toss a guy like that in with the soldiers, and he's going to be in trouble. Worst case scenario, he gets so cornered that he kills himself. They say that's why they assigned him to me even if it does mean more for me to deal with. Lee Haku was good at looking after people, he would take the minimum of care for his men. His name's Ujun, so he has that Yu character, but he hasn't actually been acknowledged as a member of the main house of the Yu family. His dad was an adopted son and just went way too far. He brought a concubine into the main house, and tormented his daughter who belonged to the main bloodline so badly that she had to abandon the world. And on top of that, he brought down the family name. No way they can let his concubine's son inherit. You know quite a lot about this. The head of the Yu clan referred to Ujun only as Jun. Got to know at least a little something about your subordinates. His dad, Uriua, when his father-in-law retired early because he was sick, Uriua took it as an opportunity to just do whatever he wanted, I guess. Even if Ujun didn't do anything wrong, he was destined to be a lightning rod. Unlike Mao Mao, Lee Haku was very put together. He was physically strong and had a decent head on his shoulders. Leave out the fact that he was lavishing his money on a courtesan and he was nearly perfect, but for her sister Pyrin's sake, Mao Mao hoped he wouldn't give up his brothel habit. Sounds like the head of the Yu clan, Lady Li Shu's grandfather, has adopted a boy from one of his relatives and is raising him. Tough job for an old body, but I guess he doesn't think he can trust his son-in-law another inch. I guess not. Mao Mao nodded, impressed by Lee Haku's range of information. You know about that? Lee Haku asked. I saw him at the meeting of the named recently. A boy, less than 10 years old, right? Yeah, that's him. At his age, I guess they're not planning to marry him off to Lady Li Shu. You can never say never. The Ma clan was an example of that. Gao Shun and his wife Tao Mei were 6 years apart, and Tao Mei was the older. The leader of the Yu had said, however, that he had no such intentions. Basan's face had gone from red to pale and now resumed its normal color. You know, I think he feels so bad about his granddaughter being so poorly treated for so long that the only thing he really wants right now is to make her happy, said Lee Haku. I heard he was trying to find a decent family to match her with. That's something else I know about. Lee Haku was licking the salt from the crackers off his fingers. Mao Mao only wished she had brought more of them. Lee Haku turned to Basan. You know anything about this, buddy? Who, me? No. Not a thing. Oh, really? Basan was a terrible liar. Cornered by Lee Haku, he fretted, then groaned, then started to squirm. Looks like this could go on for a while. Mao Mao wrote as she listened. She phrased her report carefully, mostly drawing on Basan's account. I have to admit, I'm surprised, Master Lee Haku. I always thought you would look down on weaklings. I can't speak for the Yu clan, but I can't help but feel for the guy. How can you say that? Basan burst out. He did nothing but disrespect his half-sister, a full member of his family's bloodline, until she had no choice but to retire to a convent, and even now he lets people speak ill of her without batting an eye. I should have given him a knuckle sandwich to remember me by too. Okay, Mao Mao said without quite meaning to. Dujun might be a bit evasive, but he didn't do anything himself. That's the worst kind of man. By keeping things ambiguous, he gave his conversation partner the widest scope for interpretation. That way, even if someone got it into their head to cause a problem, Dujun would be a distant cause at best, not at fault and not in trouble. He's just keeping his own hands clean, Basin said. I guess you're right, said Li Haku. As Dujun's superior, Li Haku effectively found himself defending the young man, but he still had his qualms. Maybe I'll remind him not to try to play too many sides at once. Good point. Though it might be his only way to get by. It was a tough balance to strike, Mao Mao reflected. Basin still didn't look pleased. You're saying he has to do it to get by? 99.9% of people aren't as strong as you, Master Basin. Give Lady Li Shu any weapon you like, could she fend off a stray dog? Or do you think she should stand her ground no matter how weak she is, even if she might get injured or killed? Ugh! But that guy is supposed to be a man. Dujun is much more like Lady Li Shu than he is like Lady Tao Mei, who, I remind you, is a woman. They share half their ingredients, as it were. Don't go talking about ingredients, little lady, Li Haku said grimly. Then he said, anyway, Dujun might not look like much, but he's stronger than you'd think. He's real good at not making enemies. That's true, said Mao Mao. Weak folk have their own way of getting along. You mean by not making enemies? Basin asked. Li Haku made a triangle with his fingers. You're half right, half wrong. It's about making the other person think they can't be your enemy. The little lady here does it all the time. I do not do that. There she goes again. Li Haku pounded Mao Mao on the back. She quickly lifted her brush off the page lest her characters run every which way. He's like Mao Mao? All the more reason we should be careful of him, then, Basin said earnestly. What do you mean by that? Mao Mao was incensed but continued to write. Perhaps she should have stayed focused on one or the other, she found she'd miswritten a word. Chapter 15, Contradictions and Goals. The unending parade of wounded men was not the only thing Mao Mao had to worry about at work. No. Don't want to go back to work. No, Master, log on. You're going back. The freak strategist Said Onsu was attempting to pry him away from the post to which he clung like an oversized cicada. You can do it, Onsu. Mao Mao thought, privately cheering him on as she made some ointment. We need you to wrangle that predator as well as you can, to spare us even a little of the chaos we now find ourselves in. And just how am I supposed to do that? The old doctor's words left her feeling lost. One thing she did have to do, however, was her work. She ignored the cicada-esque thing and went on making salves. As usual, there was no lack of wounded in the medical office. There would be at least 4 or 5 major injuries each day, 1 or 2 of which would be hard to chalk up to training accidents. Those cases tended to be all the more obvious because, when asked for details, the people involved had a tendency to trail off. One might think that when the apex predator returned, things would quickly go back to normal, but that predator was busy playing cicada. The main outcome was that when the freak strategist was around, everybody avoided him and went to a different medical office, so Mao Mao's workload got lighter. Let's see, what else do we need? Compresses and medicine for wounds were in frequent demand, so they had to be sure they didn't run out. She also needed to help the physicians, though, so it was hard to build up a stock. When the old fart clinging like a cicada to the post was gone, Dr. Li came back, dripping sweat. Beside him was a young soldier who looked pale. I thought you were off today, Mao Mao said. I am, so I was training at the practice grounds. When he wasn't even a soldier, what was that about? Mao Mao didn't voice the question. All right. Who's that with you? He was on the grounds too, so I brought him over. You might remember him as the young man with a wooden sword in his belly from a little while ago. We told him to come back every day so we could check how his abdomen was doing, but he never did he? No, he didn't. Only then did Mao Mao register that it was indeed the same soldier. She and Dr. Li looked at him. You sewed me up, so I'm doing just fine. Don't worry about me. It'll get better in good time, he said. Is that so? Mao Mao asked. For all that, he didn't look very good. Let's have a look. Dr. Li pinioned the young man. Mao Mao undid his belt and the bandages around his belly. Ugh, it stinks, she exclaimed. What did you say? He demanded. Forget changing the bandages, it smells like you haven't even taken a bath since we worked on you. That's the trouble with young men. Dr. Li added. They have such good metabolism, and it gives them the worst body odor. At least wipe yourself down from time to time. What's going on? First you pin me, then you strip me. The young soldier struggled, but the outrageously bulked up Dr. Li was too strong for him. Mao Mao, go get another doctor. We're going to change these bandages right now. Yes, sir. Mao Mao went to the next room and dragged a physician back with her. The bandages, which they had wrapped tightly to stop the bleeding, released an even more overpowering smell as they were undone. Looks like it's a bit infected, Mao Mao remarked. Did you do any strenuous exercise? Some of the stitches have broken. Did you take your anti-infectives? Dr. Li asked. I wish you wouldn't treat it this way, the other doctor grumbled. When it never heals, you'll blame us. Okay, shall we stitch him back up? This physician was a stubbly man somewhere in his 30s. Unlike in the rear palace, the doctors in the outer court were usually quite accomplished. Moreover, those who worked near the training grounds saw crowds of patients every day, and worked with an eye toward efficiency. It was practically pleasant to watch the way they went about their business with no wasted movement. We're done cutting away the infected area and cleaning the wound. Here's the needle, Mao Mao said, offering the two men tools. They started sewing. The young soldier had been given a bandage to bite on. He had bruises here and there, though whether they were from training or from something else was impossible to say. They only needed to re-sew one spot, so the work was quickly done. If you don't change your bandages, it'll never heal, no matter how long you give it, Dr. Li admonished the young man. And I wish you'd take your medicine. That's what it's for, added the other doctor. Please make sure you return the trousers and underpants we loaned you the other day, Mao Mao chipped in. She seemed to have struck a nerve, because the young soldier went bright red. He probably didn't care to be reminded that a man of his age had wet himself. Dr. Li cornered the young soldier. Now, forgive me for interrogating you when we've just sewn you up, but could you tell us who did this to you? Everyone disappeared in such a rush last time. It left us in quite a tizzy. It was just a little mishap during training. It doesn't matter who did it. Excuse me? Someone was obviously trying to kill you. You had a broken wooden sword stabbed in your belly. You're only lucky it didn't lacerate any internal organs. Mao Mao and the stubbly doctor both nodded. From your speech, I take it you're from Isei province, Dr. Li said. Having spent a year there, it was easy for him to catch the accent. The young soldier fell silent. Which would suggest the perpetrator was from the central region, the stubbly doctor said, stroking his chin. Ugh! I wish they'd find somewhere else to have their proxy battles. Aren't you angry at them for beating you up like that? Man up and report them. If I do that, all that will happen is they'll beat me black and blue, the young soldier spat. Among us soldiers, the weak are at fault for being weak. Being strong is the only thing that matters. Mao Mao could understand what he was saying, but if that logic was going to result in major injuries, she did want to resolve the matter. This wasn't just a problem for the troops, it also meant more work for the physicians. The young soldier was proving unexpectedly stubborn. They would have to insist that he at least change his bandages and take his medicine. If he didn't want to bother them with it, that was nice of him and all, but if it made his wounds worse, it would only mean more trouble in the long run. Speaking of people who bother us, Mao Mao found herself thinking of Jinshi. If this young man had let them change his dressings as often as Jinshi had let her change his, he'd be better by now. She still hadn't heard anything from Jinshi about the jade. She assumed he would contact her if he learned something. With that thought in mind, she started preparing anti-infectives to give to the young soldier. Mao Mao wasn't specifically fond of gossip, but she didn't have any aversion to it either. At the same time, though, she wasn't interested in hearing the same thing over and over. But there were those who would gamely explain something to you even if you told them politely that you already knew the story and didn't need to hear it again. Well, now, let's see. The military has been a pillar of the Empress Dowager's faction in the past, but, these last few years, Empress Gyakuyo has begun to come into her own, and the folks from Isei province are starting to throw their weight around. This was Chihu, chattering away while Mao Mao rewrapped Chihu's bandages. She'd started showing up at the medical office near the training grounds in tandem with Mao Mao's reassignment there. The physicians left Chihu's treatment to Mao Mao, a fellow woman, whether that was because they didn't want to be examining a married woman too closely, or because Chihu could be such a talker when alone with whoever was treating her. Not that the Empress Dowager's faction was going to stand by and watch. So long as Master Logon was here, the neutral faction acted as a check, and there were no major issues. But while Master Logon was away, that delicate balance was upset. She drawled. "Ah. Yes. I see." Mao Mao lifted Chihu's right arm, palpated it, and so on. Chihu could only move her fingers at what could best be described as a tremble. And it was no easier for Master Logon's camp. It's terrible some of them actually changed allegiance to the Empress Dowager's or the Empress's factions. About that, Mao Mao said, massaging Chihu's arm. "I can't get over those names. The Empress Dowager's faction and the Empress's faction. You've met both of those august ladies, haven't you, Miss Mao Mao?" "Yes. And I don't think either of them is the kind go out of her way to attack someone, is she? This makes it seem like Empress Gyakuyo and the Empress Dowager are somehow having a fight, and that feels odd." The Empress Dowager had freed slaves and built the clinic in the rear palace to create a place for palace ladies with nowhere to go. Meanwhile, the Empress, Gyakuyo, was not the type to sit quietly by if someone picked a fight with her, but she wasn't specifically bellicose. "There's no avoiding it, the families are getting involved," Chihu drawled. "The Empress Dowager's family can be quite avaricious, you know. You can probably guess that much from the fact that they sent her into the rear palace as a little girl." Yikes, Mao Mao worked the pressure points of Chihu's hand, wondering even as she did so if needle treatments were actually effective. Beside her she kept some notes, where she recorded observations about how Chihu's mobility had changed since last time. "So the Empress's faction is really Master Gyakun's faction?" she asked. "Well, yes, pretty much, but it's attracted lots of people from the provinces. It always seems to be the folks with central connections who get promoted, so the provincials have hitched their wagon to Master Gyakun, who's a meritocrat. But at his age, isn't the question of inheritance pretty pressing?" His age had been his excuse for not returning to the western capital upon the death of his eldest son Gyakuo, but Mao Mao had heard it was also because he was laboring to establish a base in the central region. "Yes, which is why the Empress Dowager's faction is currently taking aim at exactly that. They're making a move against the Empress's faction." Momo tilted her head. "It's not the newcomers, the Empress's faction, who are making a move against the Empress Dowager's faction. She recalled what the leader of the Yu clan had said about the new faction not liking him very much. No indeed. You know the saying, the nail that sticks up will get pounded down. Well, the Empress's faction is the nail. But it's not so easy to say in this case. Tell me, what do you think about Wang Feng, the guy who was killed in Master Lagan's office? I think it looks like there's more to that story. Yab. All three of the court women who conspired to kill him were connected to the Shin clan. La Han said something similar. She hadn't gotten him to elaborate on that remark yet, but Chahu seemed likely to be more forthcoming. You're suggesting that because Wang Feng belonged to the Empress's faction, the Empress Dowager's people killed him and made it look like a crime of passion? Mao Mao asked. That's certainly possible, or it might just have been a run-of-the-mill murder. What was Wang Feng looking for? Ooh, what shall I do here? Okay, I'll tell you just because. Chao whispered in Mao Mao's ear. Wang Feng was supposedly searching for a Shin family heirloom that was said to have disappeared. Mao Mao was careful not to let the shock show on her face. Each of the three women had relatives who were friends with the former leader of the Shin clan. Wang Feng was asking around about exactly what shape this heirloom took. An heirloom, Mao Mao still thought this could also be connected to Joka's jade tablet. Was he looking for an imperial relative who isn't on the family tree? No, if Wang Feng belonged to the Empress's faction, he didn't need to finagle himself a convenient royal. Something didn't make sense here. Mao Mao let go of Chahu's hand, feeling as if she only had more questions than before. Oh! My poor wound aches. Chahu said and rubbed her hand demonstratively, evidently angling for more massage. We have to call it here for today. I have other work to do, Mao Mao said. You're no fun. When Mao Mao left the room, she found a tall court lady holding a basket. Okay. I'm pretty sure that's. It was the newcomer with the short name. She was dressed rather thoroughly, perhaps to avoid showing any skin. I got the herbs you asked for, she said. Great. The basket was full of them. This young lady as well as the other newcomer, Chang Sha, was being put to a great deal of work by various departments while they were still new. Could you hang on for a second? Mao Mao asked, checking the contents of the basket against her notes about what she had ordered. Let's see. Rhubarb root, spatterdock, cinnamon, all of which could contribute to treating bruises. That's everything. No problems. Mao Mao took the basket and was going to put the herbs in the medicine cabinet immediately, but the new girl showed no sign of leaving. Miss Mao Mao, Miss Mao Mao. She's looking at you like she wants to say something. Chao, who had also not left, said, nudging her. Is there anything else you need? Mao Mao asked. I heard from Yao and NN that you run an apothecary shop in the city, Mao Mao, the new girl said with utmost gravity. I do. Then, is there any chance you know about this man, another apothecary? I think he's been running an apothecary shop or serving as a doctor in the capital the past several years. A man who became an apothecary? I know a few of those. Her own pupil was among them. You do? Uh-huh. His name is Seizan, and he works at an apothecary shop in the Pleasure District. Seizan. Pleasure District. Do you think it could be a false name? Does he look, like he has a story? Mao Mao paused. The girl was acting a little funny. Maybe Mao Mao had been wrong to give Seizan's name so easily. Come to think of it, he did escape from the confusion of the Shi clan affair. It could be bad news if it was discovered that he'd been involved in that. He was a decent guy, and anyway, she'd worked hard on him. She didn't want to have to find yet another new apothecary. Another question, why did this girl want to find a man serving as an apothecary? I'm begging you. Let me meet this Seizan person. The new girl grabbed Mao Mao's collar and shook vigorously. But... if you won't tell me where he is, I'll find him myself. You said he was in the Pleasure District. Definitely shouldn't have said that. There weren't that many apothecaries in the pleasure district. The new girl would find Seizan without much trouble. Miss Mao Mao, why don't you just take her there? Miss Chou, I don't think this is any of your business. Hoo. Miss Chou will go with you. She's got time to kill now that she's been let go from her old job. Chou chortled merrily. Mao groaned and wondered what to do. The new girl still hadn't let go of her. Chapter 16, Yo. The tall new girl proved tenacious. Mao finally had to admit defeat, and agreed to meet her on a day when they were both off work. They were from different departments, and there were plenty more of these new court ladies where this girl had come from. It was easier than trying to schedule a break with Yao and NN. I'm Yo. It's a pleasure to meet you, the new girl said to Chou, who was there just as she'd promised. It was a very helpful introduction, since Mao still didn't remember the girl's name. Yo was less talkative than Changsha, the other new girl. Mao tended to be a passive partner in conversations anyway, so silence naturally prevailed between them. If we weren't going to say anything, maybe we should have just met in the pleasure district. Instead they had decided to meet at the dorm and walk, and the entire trip went by in silence. It was quite a ways from the dorm to the pleasure quarter, but Mao, characteristically, still felt it would be a waste to get a carriage. She came from poverty, it was a hard mindset to change. I guess I couldn't ask a young woman to walk around alone in the pleasure quarter. Maybe she could have had Chou come with them, but instead she would meet them at the verdigris house. Unlike Mao, who had been born and raised there, a decent girl wandering around the pleasure district alone was liable to get attacked. Mao could put up with a little awkwardness. As they went down the main streets, past the willows swaying by the canal, and finally past the small street stalls, the kinds of people they saw began to change. Mao and Yo went through a towering, shimmering gate. Guards standing on either side gave them a sharp look as they passed. Mao recognized one of them, so she waved to him. Oh, it's you, he said with a nod. What, playing procurer now, Xiao Mao? He gave Yo an appraising glance. I'm not here to sell anyone. Mao replied. Yo looked intimidated by the exchange. She gave Mao a doubtful stare, but Mao really wasn't going to sell anybody into prostitution. She wished Yo would just relax. Truthfully, though, an ignorant laywoman passing through the gate to the pleasure district could only be heading in to sell herself. The air was thick with exotic perfumes and languid sighs. There were prostitutes seeing off customers heading home in the morning, apprentices bringing in the lanterns for the day, and pet birds singing from second-floor windows. They walked down the district's main thoroughfare, Mao like she belonged there, Yo like she was very frightened. Try to walk straight ahead and keep your eyes forward, Mao said. If anyone grabs your hand, shout as loud as you can. Yeah. Okay. After a bit more walking, they arrived at the verdigris house. Oh. Mao. Been a while. Yu, the head of the men servants, greeted her. He was a good-natured character who had served the establishment a long time, and helped keep an eye on Seizan and Zhou interceding for another young lady. I hope she's less trouble than the last one. I'm not selling her, Mao growled again. Yo continued to look worried. Why should they assume that Mao was here to sell off any young girl she brought along? The last one who had been so much trouble was Zulin's sister, who'd indeed been up to no good the last time Mao had visited. She wondered if the madam's discipline had had any effect on the girl. And how is our troublesome friend doing? She asked. Keeping her nose clean for now. She knows she's not going to find another brothel that'll take her in with her sister. Evidently, Zulin's sister was not such a fool that she couldn't do the math. The old madam might be a miser, but few places were as well off as the verdigris house. Yo was looking at them uncomfortably, but Mao still had another question for Yu. Did they ever find that thief? She meant the one who had been Zulin's sister's customer before breaking into Joka's room. Yeah, they found him. An acrobat, spends most of his time earning small change by doing stunts. No way he had enough money to actually patronize the verdigris house. So what was he doing here? Someone else must have put him up to it. Asked him to break into the brothel and steal something they were after. And the person who commissioned him? Haven't found them. The acrobat was a lizard's tail, you might say. Yukio held up his hands in defeat. Anything else would be outside of our jurisdiction. Well, nothing to be done, then. Mao Mao came back to the main point. All right, is Seizun around? I wanted to see him. Not yet. This time of day, I think he might be in the field out back. Thanks. Yo, still looking intimidated, followed Mao Mao toward the field. He looked like he probably outranked you. Was it really okay to talk to him like that? She asked anxiously. Mao Mao admitted that she didn't speak to Yukio with any unique respect. But she'd been on conversational terms with him for so long, if she started talking deferentially now, he'd only laugh at her. If anything, he would probably try to stop her from making him seem important. It's not really a question of what's okay. That's how I was raised. The way I talk in the palace, I do that because it's for work. For work. Since Mao Mao accepted that she was at a job in the palace, she tended to be careful to speak politely to everyone, whether they were older or younger than she was. It was easier than risking a lapse into uncouth language. They went around the back of the verdigris house. In the field near the old shack where Mao Mao used to live was a man of middling build. There he is, Mao Mao said, politely. Then she called, Hey, Seizun. She gave a big wave, and Seizun slowly worked his way upright. He'd been harvesting garlic. In addition to taking the edge off fatigue, it could serve as a vitality enhancer, so it was an essential herb around the pleasure district. Plus, a big, fat bulb of garlic was delicious in cooking. What is it? Here to check the inventory, he called back. No, I brought someone who wants to meet you. Mao Mao presented him with Yo. Me. Seizun's eyes narrowed. He didn't seem to recognize her. Yo didn't look any more impressed than he did. Who is this person? She asked. Mao Mao glowered at her. A somehow shady-seeming man who's been an apothecary here for a few years now. Why do I get the feeling I'm being insulted? Seizun said, staring at Mao Mao. That's not him. I mean a shady-looking man. He's lanky and has a handsome face, but half of it is covered and you can never quite tell what he's thinking. Why do I get the feeling I'm being called not handsome? Mao Mao pointedly ignored Seizun's questions. Instead she stroked her chin and tilted her head. Seizun. Is you know who here? You know, it just so happens he is. Mao Mao looked into the shed. Whoa. Something up? Seizun, came a sleepy and altogether unguarded voice. A pretty boy type with half his face covered emerged from the shed, yawning. He didn't look like much, his belt wasn't even tied properly. They could catch glimpses of his loincloth. That's Kokoyo, Seizun said of the swaying, but cheerful, cosmopolitan man. He showed up yesterday, but because it was late, I let him stay the night. If you're not looking for me, maybe you're looking for H. Doctor. Yo cried the moment she saw him, and rushed over to him. Only to punch him as hard as she could. There was a thump that sounded loud enough to make Mao Mao wonder if someone had broken their teeth or their fist. As if that wasn't enough, Yo jumped on the toppled Kokoyo and started pounding him. Hey, stop that! Seizun cried. What does she think she's doing? Damn it! Mao Mao and Seizun between them pried Yo off of Kokoyo. She was weeping piteously, dripping snot. Yo, is that you? My, how you've grown, Kokoyo said, smiling in spite of the blood pouring from his nose. The bandages covering his face had come off, revealing his awful smallpox scars. It was very in character for him to keep smiling even after someone had punched him, but it was also sort of unsettling. If you're here in the capital, that must mean. Yes, that's right. It happened exactly as you said. Yo's fists, covered in blood from Kokoyo's nose, were quivering. Then she said something that Mao Mao never saw coming. The village was destroyed. Her sleeves had rolled up during the fighting, she had smallpox scars just like Kokoyo. Mao Mao decided to start with some talking. They couldn't very well have their discussion in the middle of the herb patch, so they went into the shed. The shed boasted only the absolute minimum of furnishings, so they turned over pots and buckets to make up for the lack of chairs. Sorry it's so filthy, Seizen said. Well, excuse me, Mao Mao replied. She and her old man had once lived here. Isn't there anywhere a little cleaner? Like, maybe we could rent a room in the verdigris house, chirped Chihu, who had shown up somewhere along the line. She had never met Seizen or Kokoyo before, but inserted herself into the conversation like she belonged there. Very Chihu-esque. Admittedly, the shed was pretty cramped with 5 people crammed inside. Yo's eyes were still puffy, but her breathing had calmed. Her hands were a bit swollen as well from hitting Kokoyo. As for Kokoyo, he had some cuts in his mouth, but none of his teeth were broken. Yes, it had been a woman attacking him, but he hadn't resisted at all, and getting hit would still hurt, but he himself continued to grin. He had cloth shoved into his nostrils to stop the bleeding, not a very heroic look. All right. I take it that you know each other, Yo and Kokoyo. Mind explaining what's going on? Mao Mao poured hot water into some tea bowls and handed them out. Chihu gave her a look as if to ask if she didn't have any snacks, but, well, she didn't. Shall I do it? Kokoyo asked. Yo was still sniffling and didn't seem in any position to tell a story. If you would, Mao Mao said. Mao Mao, I told you that the village shaman took a nasty dislike to me and chased me out of the place, right? Yes, she recalled that he had said that. She'd met Kokoyo maybe 2 years before, when she'd helped him as he was being refused entry to a ship because of his scars. That had been on the way home from her first trip to the western capital. Yo and her family lived in that village, he said. And the village was destroyed. Mao Mao felt she couldn't leave the subject alone. Was it by a plague of insects? I know you said you were blamed for the plague, and they chased you out. Yet. That, might not be the whole truth. I think it was the disease. Smallpox, Yo said. Smallpox, Mao Mao repeated. A highly infectious, highly fatal illness. First came a fever, then patients developed a rash, and even if they survived that stage, the rash would form pustules and leave lifelong scars. That's when you got the scars on your face, too, Kokoyo. No, I had my encounter with smallpox before I came to their village. Dangerous business, smallpox, huh? I thought for sure I was gonna die. As usual, he didn't sound the least bit concerned about it. We lived in a small pioneer town far to the northwest of the capital, Yo volunteered. We cut down the forest to make fields, but it was a very new village, and the fields weren't enough to sustain us yet, so we sold the wood we cut down to buy food from outside. I see. One of those frontier towns, Mao Mao said, beginning to understand why the village had been lost. You'd be the first to be hit when there was a shortage of food. Many pioneers were poor folk who had no land of their own. Then a plague of locusts occurred. Food got more expensive. The undersupplied pioneer village could no longer afford it. They starved. That made everyone weaker. Which made them sick. A place like theirs would be the first to be abandoned during an outbreak of communicable disease. They would vanish before their name could even be added to the maps. Soon everyone would forget them, and it would be as if they had never existed. Hence no word would come to the central government, and there would be no problem. I did hear talk that some smallpox cases had appeared in the vicinity just before I left. I did wonder, Kokuyo said. But then you left our village, didn't you, Kokuyo? Yo said, her voice low. Why? Why did you leave us there? We couldn't call a doctor, so we just died in droves. Fresh tears started spilling from her already swollen eyes. I was chased out, Kokuyo said, calmly and placatingly. The village headman never liked me much, didn't feel there was enough food to share with me. If I hadn't beat feet, I probably would have ended up as a sacrifice in some ritual. He even claimed that my treatments were evil spells. It hadn't been Kokuyo's fault. Yo could blame the headman for chasing him away. She knew that perfectly well. But for Yo, still in her early teens, her emotions could still overwhelm what she knew rationally. So what? If only you had stayed. She stood up, tears plopping to the ground. After Kokuyo's banishment, the smallpox had spread, and the villagers had succumbed. There had been nothing they could do but watch helplessly. One could only imagine the living hell that Yo had experienced. If you had been there for us, Kokuyo. Kokuyo had already had smallpox, and supposedly those who had caught it once couldn't catch it again. With his medical knowledge, Kokuyo might have been able to save lives. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Kokuyo apologized, but it wasn't his fault. His banishment had been decreed by the headman, and when he was told in no uncertain terms to leave, he'd had no choice but to go. The beating Yo had given him was only a way of acting out. She knew that. But in spite of that knowledge, her impotent helplessness had driven her to take out her anguish on the grown-up Kokuyo. Still, jumping on him and pounding him? She looked like she was raised better than that. If it had been anyone but Kokuyo, she could have expected them to fight back. Why, though? Why didn't you stay with us? I'm sorry. He might look flaky, but he's surprisingly mature. Kokuyo smiled at the puffy-eyed Yo, then clasped her head to his chest. All right. Sorry to interrupt this very emotional moment, but Miss Chao has a question, Chao broke in. You said, Yo, that you came to the capital with your family. So your village was destroyed, but your family was all okay. That was a very perceptive question. Mao Mao had been wondering the same thing. Yo, who had finally calmed down a bit, took a sip of water and said, in my case, Kokuyo treated me before the outbreak. Treated? Mao Mao's ears pricked up, and she looked at Kokuyo with interest. Even Seizen must have been curious, because he looked very serious. Oh, it's a time-tested method, Kokuyo said. Once you catch smallpox, it's hard to catch it again. So you just give a healthy person smallpox. You're talking about putting pus with weakened toxin in a person's body? Mao Mao asked. She'd heard just a little about the technique from her father, Luo Men. Yet, you pull the scab off a smallpox scar, they can cause illness for almost a year after you get better. See? Do you think you could do that for me? Kokuyo crossed his arms and hummed. I'd love to, really I would, but I don't have a good scab here and it's tough, because it can go wrong. Go wrong how? You mean it can turn into a serious illness? Yet, 1 out of every few dozen people gets it bad. Sometimes they die. And of course, you're left with scars. Yes, we can't have you getting any scars, Miss Mao Mao, Chao said, sipping her water. Mao Mao didn't really see the problem, she already had scars. Sometimes they die? That makes you stop and think, Seizen said, his brow furrowing. I wish there were some safer way, a way to get weaker toxin and use that, Kokuyo said, staring into the distance. Wow, and you attempted that dangerous procedure on such a young lady. Didn't her parents get mad? Chao drawled. My father got smallpox once a long time ago, answered, not Kokuyo, but Yo. Part of the reason he came to that pioneer village was because he'd lost his family to the disease, and poverty left him with no other choice. I didn't exactly appreciate it at first myself. The fever was agony, and of course now I have these scars for the rest of my life. She rolled up her sleeves to show them. Yo's old man was really nice. He took me in when I was about to starve to death. But the rest of the villagers thought I was creepy and didn't like me, said Kokuyo, once more laughing off his dark past. In any case, that's why me and my family survived. Most of the villagers died, and we brought the surviving children with us when we came to the capital. That was almost 3 years ago now, Yo said. It had been 2 years and change since Mao Mao had met Kokuyo, which must have meant that he had been wandering until then. So you started working in the rear palace to support your family, Mao Mao said. Yes. The doctor taught me some basic reading as well, which helped with studying in the rear palace. Now Mao Mao understood why Yo had been considered an exceptional student. You owe him all that, and the first thing you do when you see him is punch him. Seizen asked, utterly cold. Yes. I know. I know what you mean, but I just couldn't. Totally understandable. A person has a lot of emotions at your age, so they're not very good at expressing them, Chahu said, acting very knowing. I think you could stand to use your words a little more too, Mao Mao added. You should have said from the start that you were looking for someone with smallpox scars. Miss Chahu thinks you're the last person who should complain about people not using enough words, Chahu said. Then she started hunting around the shed. She came up with one lone bean bun, in a bamboo steamer on the stove. Is this all you've got? Talk about depressing. Don't just help yourself to other people's breakfast. Seizen exclaimed. Okay, so a lot has happened to you, but in any case, you got to meet your mysterious apothecary, I mean doctor. What will you do now? Mao Mao asked Yo. Nothing. I know Kokuyo is safe, and that's enough for me. And I'm so glad to know that you and your dad and everyone are all right, Kokuyo said with a grin. But it definitely looks to me like there's something you want to know, and it's not just whether I'm in one piece. There is. What should I do if there's another smallpox outbreak? That's what I really wanted to ask you. I sure don't know. I don't? As in, someone else might? Mao Mao asked. She was every bit as interested in this topic as Yo was. My own mentor was researching smallpox and other infectious diseases. But then? Then what? He died, sadly. Oh, Mao Mao's shoulders slumped with disappointment. I think his research was probably coming along, said Kokuyo. Me and another person were both seated with smallpox the same way, and I ended up like this, but the other guy was perfectly fine. I think he probably got the weakened specimen. Hold on a second, Mao Mao said, holding up a hand. I don't think I can ignore what I just heard. How so? Oh. The other guy was my younger twin brother. Our mentor took us in because he said we would be perfect for comparing in experiments. Once again, he spoke blithely of a dark past. That's important, but it's not what I meant. A weakened specimen. Yet it seems like my brother received a much weaker version of smallpox, but it's not written down. And since our mentor is dead, I guess we'll never know. Where's your brother now? Seizen asked conversationally. He's dead too, Kokuyo said, grinning. So there's nobody left who knows about my mentor's research. Real sorry. He held up both hands in a would-be cute gesture. Is there no way to stop an epidemic? Yo asked, her face grim. It sure wouldn't be easy, Kokuyo said. Although maybe if we had Kata's book or something, that might help. Mao Mao almost spit out her drink. He's mentioning that here and now? Kata's just a legend, right? He didn't write any book, Seizen grumbled. My mentor says he did. He says there was a physician named Kata a century or more ago, and that his disciples hid a book of his secret teachings. In a pig's eye, replied Seizen, who had given up trying to reclaim his bean bun from Chahu and was drinking some water. Kata. Mao Mao crossed her arms and thought. Her stomach growled, maybe from the effort. Oh yeah. I haven't eaten yet, she said. Ooh, let's have something. A meal. Chahu had finished the bun and was once more searching for something to eat. Mao Mao, remembering the stall they'd passed in the street, decided to go out and get some meat skewers. They'd finished their skewers, and Mao Mao was scowling. She, Seizen, and Yo were all packed into the Verdigris house's cramped apothecary shop. As to what they were doing, they were comparing their inventory to a list. They'd done what they had come here to do, namely, to let Yo meet Kokoyo, and Mao Mao had decided to bring Yo to the apothecary shop for some practical experience. Is it just me, or have herb prices ballooned recently? Mao Mao asked, squinting at what they had paid for their herbs. I know, right? Highway robbery. Seizen griped. But Kokoyo says this is what we have to pay or he won't sell to us. He's our only purveyor of wetland herbs. Speaking of Kokoyo, the shop was too small for everyone, so he and Chahu were outside, playing with the kids. Joyu was among them. The moment he'd seen Mao Mao he'd pointedly ignored her, which annoyed her despite the fact that he was simply at that age. Ugh, this one's expensive too. Look at him, squeezing us just because this thing only grows in bogs. There was a limit to what herbs they could cultivate in their little field. And with only so many ways to procure herbs otherwise, they weren't in any position to make demands. It probably doesn't help that the palace is buying up supplies. They were going through more and more medicine these days, and not just because the soldiers needed so much of it. Vast quantities of food and medical supplies had been sent to the western capital the previous year. The elevated prices were probably a knock-on effect. One of these days, you're going to have to start shopping for herbs, so now is a good time to start learning what things should cost. Mao Mao showed Yo the list. It was not something she would reveal to just anyone, but she didn't think Yo would abuse the knowledge. Usually, you'll be able to go shopping with another physician, but some shady sellers will wait until the doctor is busy with something else before approaching you to try to hawk something. I only have a few left, they'll say, or I don't know when I'll get more in stock. You have to be especially careful, then they might try to foist bad product on you. Yes, ma'am. Heaven knows it's happened to me a few times, Seizen said with a sigh. That's because you're a terrible businessman, said Mao Mao. Oh, hush. I was just a farmer before this, you know. A former farmer. Now that she thought about it, maybe she should talk to their current farmer, namely, Lahan's brother, sound him out on whether he could grow medicinal herbs in addition to potatoes and wheat. He wouldn't try to tell me he couldn't do it because he's busy growing spices to give NN, would he? Most of those spices could also be used medicinally. Mao Mao formulated a plan to ask him for any extras. Once they had gone over the entire list, Mao Mao inspected their stocks and looked at the medicines Seizen had already compounded. What do you think? He asked, studying her expression. Not bad. Not good. Passing marks. Oh, come on. I did it just the way you taught me. You need to do more than just learn. Think about how you can make the medicine easier to take. Seizen stuck out his lip but took out a notepad. It was full of medicinal recipes. Seizen was not a man of greater than ordinary intelligence, but he studied hard, that was his virtue. Maybe I should work on compounding while we're here, Mao Mao thought. Can you make a medicine you know of using the components we have here? If all you need is fever medication or salve for a cut, then yes. All right. Go ahead and do it. While Yo was working on that, Mao Mao continued to study the inventory. Yo's movements were uncertain, but she was doing the right things. Did Kokoyo teach you to do that? Mao Mao asked. Yes. The doctor taught many of the village children to read, write, and make medicine. Being a frontier outpost, we had no end of injuries. Mao Mao had always thought of Yo as reticent, but she turned out to be surprisingly talkative. Did he treat anyone besides your family for smallpox? No. My father knew how terrible the disease could be, but no one else really did, and they wouldn't listen to him. The headman, in particular, he was also the village shaman, so he probably saw Kokoyo as horning in on his territory. I believe he did treat several of the children on the sly, though. They're the ones who are now here with us in the capital. He just did that on his own initiative, huh? Yet his choice had saved those kids' lives. Some guys just aren't very lucky, and Kokoyo is one of them, Seizen piped up from where he was inspecting the inventory list himself. Looks to me like he didn't do anything wrong, yet. I don't know why you hit him, he said with his eyes. Yo looked down uncomfortably and focused on grinding the herbs. Mao Mao glanced out of the shop, toward the lobby of the verdigris house. There are more men servants around here that I don't recognize. Bodyguards that Jinshi had assigned here, presumably. Mao Mao hadn't used Joka's name in association with the Jade Tablet, but of course he would have investigated on his own. So, no problems here, I guess. At just that moment, Joka came into the lobby. Mao Mao was about to call out to her, but she started talking with the old madam, who showed her a list. Our sis Joka's going to take things over after the old lady, said a sour voice from above her. She looked up to see Joyu. That old bag of bones is finally wearing out, huh? Pretty much. That was all Joyu said before he went back to Chao and Kokoyo. Chao was spinning atop, her performance earning applause not only from the apprentices, but even from passers-by. It was mystifying how she could do all that almost entirely with her left hand. A few kittens scuffled at her feet. Nearby, Mao Mao the calico cat watched them with a newfound dignity. They must be her offspring. So she really is retiring, Mao Mao thought. Joka was going to give up being a courtesan. The madam dealt with a great many different tasks, so the changeover wouldn't happen quickly, but Joka would probably take less and less courtesans' work. After that, only Pyrrhin would be left of the verdigris house's 3 princesses, and she, too, would be gone once Li Haku bought out her contract. Mao Mao summoned memories of her earliest years. She remembered the princesses looking beautiful, with white on their cheeks and rouge on their lips, their hair festooned with hair sticks and clad in sumptuous outfits and pibo shawls. How often had she chased their long sleeves as they slid across a red carpet. There was Pyrrhin, almost seeming to leave an afterimage as she danced in the warm glow of a red lantern. Mei Mei, leaving customers speechless as she made the perfect move, speaking with her kind voice and placing a piece with her slim fingers. Joka, producing poems that could leave her patrons gasping even as she affected to be too good for it all. I won't be seeing any of those things again. It wasn't precisely nostalgia that would have been bad form, but Mao Mao nonetheless grieved the sense that the era of these ladies was coming to an end. Chapter 17, The Forbidden Hunting Ground. Time flew at a busy department like the one Mao Mao was assigned to, and before she knew it, it was summer, the season when the cicadas sang fulsomely. In addition to her assigned duties, Mao Mao was receiving the same education as the physicians. She thought she had finished with that when she had been selected to go to the Western capital, but no. A doctor must study their whole life. They have to make sure their skills don't get dull. The folks who went to the Western capital will now undergo the same intensive training as the rookie physicians. Since this injunction came from the chief physician, Dr. Liu himself, Mao Mao's only possible reply was yes, sir. And as for the form that intensive training took, I guess we're going to some farm somewhere today, huh? Mao Mao sat in a bouncing carriage, Dr. Li and Tianyu seated across from her. They had previously performed dissections on livestock and game animals as a prelude to doing autopsies, and now they had been instructed to go for a refresher. This was hardly the first time she had been out with Tianyu to do dissections, but having Dr. Li along was unusual. It's not a farm today. It's a hunting ground, I gather, he said. I thought this time of year was closed season around here, Tianyu said. Dr. Li was silent at that. Closed season, in other words, hunting was forbidden. Mao Mao was no hunter, so she didn't know very much about it, but she had heard that hunters avoided animals' mating seasons. Some areas of Keihu province declare closed season from spring through summer. I'm almost sure this area is off limits this year, Tianyu pressed. How do you know so much about it? Dr. Li asked, casting a look at the uncharacteristically insightful Tianyu. I mean, this is where I'm from. Before she could stop herself, Mao Mao jumped to her feet. Be careful! Dr. Li cried, and he was right to warn her. The carriage jumped, and Mao Mao nearly fell down. She quickly resumed her seat. What are you doing, Niang Niang? Tianyu asked. Mao Mao simply sputtered, where you're from? My home. Ugh, what should I do? If my dad finds out I'm here, he'll turn me into jerky. Why would Dr. Lu send us to Tianyu's home? If it really was Dr. Lu who had ushered Tianyu into the world of medicine, he would at least know where he had come from. Well, I can probably guess why there's still hunting going on even though it's closed season, Tianyu said. Dr. Li looked away. Only hunters are forbidden from hunting. If you're rich or important, you get a free pass, right? Dr. Li didn't say anything at all. He seemed to be a pretty poor liar. His silence was as good as confirmation. But I'll bet it's not just some money bags this time, Tianyu went on. It's a bigwig. Some pampered princeling, maybe. How could you know that? Ha ha ha. The hunting grounds around here are my dad's turf. He never liked jobs that had to do with the court, and I think maybe once I left home, he stopped taking them at all. Dr. Li was silent again. Tianyu might have an unseemly taste for dissections, but he was intelligent. These important guys want to eat whatever game they get, but carving up an animal is hard. So they'll hire a hunter or whoever happens to be around. And we're the ones who were chosen this time? Mao Mao asked. Yep. To be sure, Tianyu was second to none when it came to butchering animals. I'm guessing Dr. Lu had to bite his tongue when he sent us out here, Mao Mao said. Physicians aren't usually assigned to chop things up. The human autopsies were of course a secret, but animal dissections were unlikely to be smiled upon either. Yet, I kind of assumed Dr. Lu would say no to something like this, said Tianyu. Mao Mao agreed that it seemed out of character for him. It wasn't Dr. Lu who chose this place. He would never agree to send trained physicians on such a trivial errand, Dr. Li said. So we've been summoned here secretly, without Dr. Liu's knowledge. Yikes. I bet he's gonna be mad. Don't even say it. Look, no matter how high you rank, there's always someone over your head. Someone with their own problems to deal with. It sounded like life wasn't easy for Dr. Li. Was there no one else to send? Frankly, I'm awfully worried having Tianyu along, Mao Mao said. And I'm awfully worried having Niang Niang along, Tianyu said. Yes, well. The request was specifically for people who wouldn't flinch no matter what happened. That doesn't sound foreboding at all, Mao Mao said. She was trying to decide whether she should consider it an honor that she had been chosen for this trip. We'll do the work in a small shed dedicated to the purpose so nobody sees us. We'll also change our clothes and wear masks. Ugh, that sounds hot. Tianyu complained. We'll have to be careful not to get dizzy, Mao Mao agreed. She was thinking about what happened in the retreat area some years before. Jinshi had gotten heat stroke then, to make matters even more complicated, been targeted by an assassin. And that was how I learned about the frog. In spite of her 1,000-yard stare, Mao Mao managed a question. There are other hunting grounds. Why did they pick this one? Funny you should ask. There are supposed to be zhen birds there. Zhen birds? Mao Mao cried, her eyes sparkling. The zhen was a bird that was supposed to be extremely poisonous. There were records of several people having been assassinated by means of these birds throughout history, but whether the stories were entirely true remained unclear. If the animals really existed, and weren't just legends, then Mao Mao wanted to see one. You should know better than to talk about poisons in front of Niang Niang, Tianyu chided the other physician. Oops. It just slipped out, said Dr. Li regretfully. Is that what they're hunting? I'd love to catch one alive if possible. Arg. If you'd just told me, I could have prepared some things to help us withstand Zhen poison. You're assuming these mythical birds actually exist, Niang Niang. I'm sorry to tell you this, but you won't be part of the dissections, Mao Mao, Dr. Li said. Huh. Mao Mao's jaw hung open. Why not? I can cope with the heat. I'll even wash the internal organs if that's what you want. The intestines had excrement in them, so it was no one's favorite job, but Mao Mao would volunteer for it today. Dr. Li said, you have other work to do. Something you're very good at, I hear. Tasting food for poison. Oh. Only then did she finally realize that something must be afoot. Once they arrived at the hunting grounds, Tianyu and Dr. Li went one way while Mao Mao went another. We've been waiting for you, ma'am. Normally it might have been Chao who greeted her here, but today she was met by someone different. Helen. Indeed, and may I say what an honor it is to hear you greet me with such friendly familiarity, with no title. He was a young man, not even 20 years old, with a smile on his face, but she knew not to be fooled by his unctuous grin and his humble attitude. It was thanks to him that Mao Mao had found herself chased all over Isei province, and ultimately nearly killed by bandits. I'm not being friendly with you. Outwardly, Helen was the younger brother of Shikyo, the chieftain of the western capital and Gyaken's grandson. He served Jinshi at the moment, but it was in some ways a form of banishment from his home city. He had believed that Jinshi would be a better leader of the western capital than his own brother. Why, she couldn't fathom, and it had led him to attempt to assassinate Shikyo. He was not someone to take lightly. I've come to greet you on the Moon Prince's orders, he said. Yeah. Great. Mao Mao didn't hide her annoyance. If there had been anyone else around, it might have been one thing, but she didn't feel any special politeness was warranted when dealing with Helen alone. Apparently, they had called the physicians out here specifically to summon Mao Mao. She'd been requested by name, and the other two were essentially collateral damage, so it was sheer, strange coincidence that Tianyu was with them. I might have expected you to be surprised, but you seem quite cool about this. Has someone already told you what's going on? Let's just say I can take a guess. Mao Mao's sour mood was only partly because she had to deal with Helen. There was another reason. Don't tell me, that stuff about the Zhen was a lie. Lady Mao Mao, you're making a scarier face than my own sister. Please, fear not. The tale of the legendary poisonous bird was brought to us by the ones who invited us on this hunt. Oh, really? You're close. You're way too close to me, said Helen, whom Mao Mao had all but cornered. In any case, shall we go? He led the way, and Mao Mao followed. Helen led her to a clearing where several tents had been pitched, one very large, and three relatively smaller ones. They were living tents of the kind often seen in Isei province. She could also see a large building nearby. Is that where the Moon Prince is? She asked. No, ma'am. He was offered a room in the annex, but he refused. Why? The tents were certainly of excellent construction, but the freestanding house would have been more sumptuous still. These tents have only one entrance each. No unwanted insects can get in. Much better than a house, where you never know what might be crawling about, said the Moon Prince. Unwanted insects. Ah. Mao Mao once again thought back to the time when Jinshi had habitually hidden his face. Even then, he'd frequently found his food spiked with vitality drugs. It had been a nightmare. But wasn't it hard to refuse the accommodations? Indeed it was. We had to tell them that in addition to hunting, the Moon Prince enjoys camping out. It's tough being from the central region, you know? He doesn't own a single tent. Mao Mao looked around. In the distance she could see what looked to be a group of people setting up and taking down tents. Why? Well, if the bigwig on the trip was going to camp out, his subordinates could hardly stay in the annex. So they were trying to put up tents as best they could. And which grand official invited him this time? Mao Mao asked. This is a gathering of prominent figures from among the named clans. It's important for even members of the imperial family to get some rest and relaxation, but it's also necessary to meet and greet potential candidates for high office. Yet the Moon Prince is such a serious man that he keeps refusing these meetings. And eventually it gets harder and harder. Precisely. Personal relationships are so crucial to politics, you see. And there were some qualms about this particular gathering as well. Qualms, huh? Hulun flipped open the entrance to a tent. I'm back, Moon Prince, he said. Took you long enough, huh? Jinchi was openly shocked. Your food taster is here, Hulun said. Mao Mao bowed her head politely. In addition to the startled Jinchi, Suiren and Tao Mei were there, looking very conspiratorial. Basin was present as Jinchi's bodyguard, but he looked uncomfortable to be in the same workplace as his mother. The closed space of the tent was surprisingly cool. Several buckets filled with chunks of ice sat around, and guards moved the air with fans. A skylight provided a change of air. What are you doing here? Jinchi asked, out of sorts. Basin was likewise agog, but the two ladies-in-waiting were smiling. Was I not summoned on your orders, Moon Prince? Mao Mao looked at Suiren. I took the liberty of calling Xiao Mao here. I thought she would be perfect for the job, the old lady-in-waiting said. Mao Mao didn't know whether she was perfect, but she certainly got the impression she'd been played. Then again, he used to summon me for all kinds of annoying chores. The more Mao Mao accepted Jinchi's feelings, however, the more he seemed to want to keep his distance. Mao Mao continually felt that Jinchi was too loyal for his own good. I didn't hear anything about this, Suiren, Jinchi said. You must pardon me. Did I let myself go overboard? Suiren snickered, a strikingly girlish sound for the older woman. And she's Jinchi's real grandmother, huh? Mao Mao thought. How many other people in the tent knew that? One thing she was sure of, Basin certainly didn't. Well, anyway, have a seat, Jinchi said, and Mao Mao found an empty chair and sat down. Suiren prepared tea, as always. It's unusual for you to be part of a hunting expedition with other young people, Moon Prince, Mao Mao said, not using the name Jinchi in front of Tao Mei. I suppose. Things happen. Troublesome things, sir. Jinchi grimaced. Mao Mao thought she saw him hesitate for a second, then evidently decide that it would be better to tell her. He straightened up and folded his hands. You know there's been a good deal of skirmishing among the soldiers lately, don't you? Yes, sir, and I can honestly say it's been a real pain in the neck. It just meant more work for her. The troublemakers may refer to themselves as the Empress's faction or the Empress Dowager's faction, but it's mostly the young people who are stirring things up. They seem to want to find any excuse for a fight. You're a young person, too, remember. Mao Mao stayed quiet and let Jinchi talk. One group that's been particularly prone to violence is on this hunt. They belong to the Empress Dowager's faction. Supposedly they all hit it off at the meeting of the named and decided to go hunting together, but I can't shake the feeling there's something else going on. And you're here to find out what, sir? That's right. We have to stamp out the sparks before they can start a fire. Mao Mao acknowledged the necessity, but also worried. Don't you think that's dangerous? I doubt people claiming to belong to the Empress Dowager's faction would do me harm, even if it is a pretense on their part. If there's any danger, it's only that they might try to involve me in some unsavory plan. Regardless of how Jinchi himself might feel, those looking in from the outside probably assumed he was aligned with the Empress Dowager. These youngsters would never imagine that the man they considered to be their ally had joined them specifically to find out what they were up to. I don't think that's the only danger. I think they might try to set you up with a pretty member of their family, Mao Mao said. Jinshi glared at her and said nothing. Don't worry, sir. There's no one in this world more beautiful than the moon. Oh, please, he gave her a wry smile. In the past, he might have gotten angry at her for saying such a thing, or at least annoyed, but today, it seemed, was different. And now the time had come for Mao Mao to ask Jinshi about the real matter at hand. When does the hunt begin? In an hour. They won't be serving lunch, so you can just wait here in the tent and relax. May I not be part of the proceedings? What? This is a hunt we're talking about. Can you even shoot a bow? Of course not. But what if somebody got poisoned? Think of the risk. Mao Mao's eyes were shining. Jinshi gave her a doubtful look. Don't tell me, you believed that story about the poisonous birds. Everyone needs some dreams and romance to get them through life. This was Mao Mao's roundabout way of saying that yes, she had. Dreams and romance? Not words I usually hear from you. Slightly bemused, Jinshi took a bite of fruit. It appeared to be sugared peach with crushed ice. Unlike the last time they had gone out to beat the heat, this time Jinshi was accompanied by two highly capable ladies, Sui Ren and Tao Mei, so he wouldn't want for decent food. I guess no women are going to be creeping in here in the middle of the night with these two around. Plus, Hulun seemed likely to be a dab hand at dealing with sneaks like that. The legendary birds are just that, rumors, stories. Don't be too upset if we don't find any. I'll search for even a single feather, sir. She was ready to crawl with her nose to the ground if she had to. My, but you are persistent, Mao Mao. Sui Ren put some stewed peaches in front of her. Jinshi gave her the signal to eat, so she gratefully picked up her spoon. The soft fruit was sweet and delicious. I've learned something about the thing you asked me to investigate. It was such an old matter that it took some time. What did you find out? Mao Mao asked, setting the spoon down. Jinshi glanced around. Taking his meaning, Sui Ren ushered Hulun out the room, and Tao Mei did the same with Basin. What? I can't stay. Hulun looked studiously innocent. Mao Mao was perfectly eager to get him out of there. His cute kid act only made her angrier. Me, neither. Basin asked. You need to keep Hulun in check, Tao Mei said. Yes, ma'am. Basin didn't look very happy about it, but he wasn't about to disobey his mother's orders. Once they were both gone, Jinshi finally began to speak. The owner's real name isn't left to us, Jinshi began. But I can surmise that it seems to have belonged to an imperial family member known as Kata. Kata. There was a name Mao Mao knew. I see you recognize it. I hear he's quite famous among the physicians. He was a legendary doctor himself, Mao Mao said. Correct. However, among the imperial family he's known for something else entirely. The story goes that he's a former imperial family member who was punished for breaking a taboo. I believe you know that too. Mao Mao saw what Jinshi was getting at. Yes, she'd heard this story before. Yes, sir. Tell me what kind of person he was, Jinshi said. Mao Mao took a deep breath. As well as being a member of the imperial family, he was also an accomplished physician, so gifted that he was called by the name of a legendary doctor. He was always seeking new techniques. But he did an autopsy on the corpse of all people, the prince whom the emperor at that time loved most of all. Jinshi nodded. That couldn't be allowed even if he was part of the imperial family, so he was punished, and his name stricken from the records. I'm told that's the reason that doctors are forbidden from performing autopsies even now. That's right. The jade tablet belonged to this Kata, yes. That's right. Mao Mao squeezed her eyes shut. That would certainly be reason enough to deface the tablet. The physicians performed autopsies only on criminals, and then only in secret, because it was believed that if a corpse was disfigured, its former owner could not be reborn. Even though once you die, your body is just a lump of meat. She doubted the emperor at that time was capable of being so magnanimous in his view. The fact that we have this jade now means that Kata must have given it to someone during his lifetime, Jinchi said. So it would seem, sir. And the only person he would have been likely to give it to would be the woman carrying his child. Mao Mao scratched her head. Mao Mao. Yes. Kata lived generations ago. I don't believe His Majesty would punish his descendants now. That's what I'm trusting, sir. However, if someone is trying to get their hands on this tablet, that's a problem. Joka had consulted with Mao Mao for her own safety, specifically because she thought someone was trying to steal the jade tablet. Its former owner threw it away, Mao Mao said as firmly as she could. She felt she had to say it out loud. That owner was a woman, yes? Jinchi asked. Mao Mao hadn't said a word about that. Jinchi really had looked into the owner's identity, even though Mao Mao had never given him a name. That would explain the increased guard presence at the Verdigris house. But what would someone do with a broken jade tablet bearing the name of someone who was stricken from the records, she asked. Establish a pretext. That sounds like something from a stage play. Countries sometimes rise and sometimes fall for reasons as ridiculous as those in any play. Jinchi was deadly serious. They could never let Hulun or Basin hear them talking like this. There was no telling what Hulun might take it upon himself to do, while Basin totally lacked any ability to prudently conceal the truth. There have been times in history when an empress dowager's lover has tried to help the country flourish, or eunuchs have attempted to set up their own state, Jinchi said. Tried. Attempted. In other words, it ended in civil war. Once in a blue moon, it works. I knew I never liked history. Jinchi had a distant look in his eyes. There must be many history books full of such absurd tales. Moon Prince. Mao Mao said. Yes. Mao Mao knew she couldn't call him Jinchi in front of Tao Mei, but he didn't appear to like it very much. About this descendant of Kata's. Mao Mao pondered what exactly to do. I know about another of his descendants. It was Tianyu. She didn't specifically care what happened to him, but she didn't want to get Dr. Liu or Dr. Yu in trouble because of anything she said. But still. Under the circumstances, she had to tell Jinchi. Do you remember a physician named Tianyu? I do. A young man with a quirky streak, yes. So Jinchi did remember him. He took some peach on his spoon and put it into his mouth. He's also a descendant of Kata. BRRF. Mao Mao found herself with bits of peach on her face. Oh, my goodness gracious. Suiren was wiping Mao Mao's face in an instant. There were certain people who might have considered it a privilege to have a gorgeous nobleman spit food on them. Mao Mao, however, could sum it up in one word: unhygienic. Sorry. Of all the things I thought you would say, Jinchi said. Not at all, sir. I'm not completely certain of this story yet, so I debated whether I should say anything. Mao Mao told him how Tianyu was the son of a hunter, and how one of his ancestors was a woman who'd been Kata's bedmate. I see. Tianyu, he. Jinchi also seemed to know something about the autopsies the doctors were performing, and his expression was conflicted, partly accepting, partly knowing that this was a delicate subject. So you think he might know something about this tablet? I haven't asked him, sir, Mao Mao said firmly. Why not? Tianyu is a man who became a doctor to feed his curiosity. Dissection is what gets him out of bed in the morning, and without Dr. Liu's astute guidance, by now he would probably be digging up graves or even murdering people outright. As it is, when he catches wind of something that interests him, he disregards his own safety, drags in the people around him, makes a huge scene, and generally causes all kinds of trouble. He's not someone you can speak to carelessly. Jinshi's and Suiren's gazes both settled on Mao Mao. They made her at once uncomfortable and uneasy. Yes? What is it? She asked. It's nothing, said Jinshi. Nothing at all. Suiren agreed, and with a jolly ho 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 she began making more tea. I even thought it was possible that the dead man, Wang Feng, had been looking for Tianyu. What makes you think that? Jinshi asked, but it was a difficult question to answer. Here they entered entirely into the realm of Mao Mao's suppositions. Mao Mao couldn't shake the sense that she spoke much more on the basis of assumptions and educated guesses than she used to. Wang Feng appeared to want the tablet, she said. Not for its own sake, he was looking for members of the imperial family. Evidently, he was also investigating the Shin clan's family heirloom. Ah, yes. The Shin clan, which turned out to be the common denominator behind the 3 court ladies who killed Wang Feng. Unfortunately, we took that investigation as far as we could, but he seems to have stuck his nose in where he shouldn't. Jinshi appeared less interested in Wang Feng's murder than in what he had been after. Does that information come from Miss Chu? No. From Hulan. I take it you don't like him very much, Jinshi added when he saw Mao Mao grimace. You'd prefer that I did? No, I mean, I understand. But he is useful in his own way. There was that distant look again. He's a capable servant, but comes with his own challenges, doesn't he? Said Mao Mao. People have certainly stopped foisting work on me since he got here. I haven't had to do so many all-nighters. Come to think of it, your color does look better than usual. Mao Mao had to acknowledge the little bastard's talent. But are you sure you should keep him so close? I can do it, if I just think of him as a Lahan with a slightly different hair color. Yikes! That makes him sound like the most exquisitely awful servant. He would do his work, but always with the most untoward looks at his superior. He's quite a capable second in command. Even if he does sometimes needle other civil servants' weak points. He really is just Lahan with a different hair color, isn't he? Lahan would deny it if it were put to him in those terms, but that was no skin off Mao Mao's nose. Anyway, sir, I think we've gotten off topic. Mao Mao got out of her chair and looked outside the tent. All she saw was the guest house and the forest. There were no commoners' houses anywhere to be seen. Tianyu's home village is supposed to be somewhere around here. Jinshi looked startled. Do you think that's coincidence? I can only hope, sir. In Mao Mao's experience, though, there had been disappointingly few cases in which so many coincidences turned out to be, well, coincidence. There were Wang Feng's footprints. Tianyu and Joka, both descendants of Kata. The jade tablet. And now, Tianyu's home area had been chosen as the party's hunting grounds. Ugh! I don't feel so good, Mao Mao said. What's wrong? Jinshi asked, suddenly seeming to be concerned about his deportment for some reason. Evidently he thought he was the one who had upset her. I mean, about Wang Feng. Something about his about the military's factional strife feels inconsistent. How so? Mao Mao had to ponder the question. It's hard to say exactly, but the military essentially has 3 factions: the Empress Dowager's people, the Empress's backers, and the neutrals, right? And Wang Feng went from the neutrals to the Empress. That's right. But does that make sense? Why would Wang Feng, a member of the Empress's faction, go looking for some undiscovered member of the imperial family? They have a perfectly good heir in Empress Gyakuyo's son, so where's the need to find another? Mao Mao crossed her arms. Moreover, there's been a lot of injuries related to factional disputes among the soldiers, but they're all over trivial things. Nobody is fighting for their convictions. It just seems like a lot of young guys who are jumping on the bandwagon so they can let off steam. A lot of them are hot-blooded, indeed. I think I see what you're saying, though. Hearing him say it, it certainly sounded true enough. But by the same token, Mao Mao saw only a lot of feuding youngsters. If I may ask, is this really factional strife? What makes you ask that? Because only young people seem to be involved, not anyone of major importance. Now that you mention it. This seemed to spark a thought for Jinchi. He would know the situation better than Mao Mao did, which suggested she wasn't just imagining this. Something's odd, though, Jinchi said. Have you heard that the Yu clan is the object of special torment? Yes, sir. From the patriarch himself. It seems the new faction in the army doesn't like me much at all. That's what he'd said. It made sense to go after a weakened, old line clan, but in Mao Mao's opinion, that didn't rise to the level of factional strife. Which clans did you say are involved in today's hunt? The Shin and the Chu, as well as the Shen the Monkey clan. The Shin again. Mao Mao thought of Mr. Love Letters and began to worry that he might butt in today. It's about time for you to be getting ready, Tao Mei warned Jinchi. I have to collect myself, he said. Of course, sir. Mao Mao stood up, clenching her fists. Jinchi, Suiren, and Tao Mei all looked at her silently. What? You're staying here? But what about my Zhen? If they exist, I promise we'll catch one and bring it back to you, Jinchi said. So just stay here. Mao Mao was about to tail Jinchi out of the tent, but Suiren caught her by the shoulder. Firmly. Chapter 18, Kata's Descendants. They would, it seemed, spend some 4 hours on the hunt. They might as well spend forever, Mao Mao thought. She was supremely bored. Ah, so that's where you're going, Suiren said. There was the rap of a go stone being placed on a board. Are you sure about that move? Tao Mei fingered her black stone. I don't care about go. She watched the two women play, but her eyes were empty. The tent was certainly impressive for something that had been put up in such a hurry, but there was nothing to do there. No cleaning was needed, and no books lay around to pass the time. They'd brought board games, yes, but Mao Mao didn't have any interest in them and could only watch. What are the chances the hunt will wrap up early? Just as the thought was crossing her mind, a guard poked his head into the tent. Yes, she asked. There's someone here who wants to see you, Lady Mao Mao. Who is it? He says his name is Tianyu. Mao Mao looked at Suiren and Tao Mei. It's all right, since we're here, Suiren said. He may come in. Is that all right? Mao Mao asked. Why, yes. Are you sure it's all right? Aren't you full of questions? Mao Mao had no recourse but to admit Tianyu to the tent. If only the women had objected, she would have been spared entertaining her troublesome colleague. For that matter, should he even be here? If it was calculation and not coincidence that had brought them to Tianyu's home area, wasn't it dangerous for him to be wandering around? Thanks, Tianyu said as he entered the tent. The moment he did, his eyes flitted every which way, taking everything in. He's practically a tourist. Did you need something? Mao Mao asked. Nah, they just haven't come back with the game yet, so I had some time to kill. Then I think maybe it's about time for you to leave. No doubt he ducked Dr. Li's gaze to come here. He must know there was a knuckle in his future, but he'd done it anyway. Oh, and it looks like there's some kind of fire out in the direction of my place, Tianyu said lightly, and pointed. You could lead with that. Mao Mao exclaimed. She ran out of the tent and looked around. There was smoke rising somewhere beyond the trees. You think it's a cook fire? Tianyu mused. That wouldn't really be better. Mao Mao asked herself what she should do. She wanted to make for Tianyu's house and see if it was still in one piece, but she could hardly go alone. What's wrong? Someone asked. She turned and found Basin. I thought you were with the Moon Prince, she said. We're working in shifts today. And I was instructed to update my mother on our progress. Basin didn't look very happy about it. He wanted to guard Jinchi at all times. Basin, said Tao Mei, emerging from the tent. She'd heard everything Jinchi and Mao Mao had said, and then a person named Tianyu had appeared. Tao Mei was smart enough to guess what Mao Mao wanted. I want you to escort Mao Mao as her guard. The report can wait. What in the world? Don't ask questions, just do it. The confusion remained on Bassan's face, but he said nothing more. Could we head toward where those flames are? Mao Mao asked. I can guide you if you want, Tianyu said, coming forward. He knew these woods, it would certainly be the fastest way. Would you? Sure. Neither Tao Mei nor Suiren said anything. Suiren, however, came over and helped Mao Mao tie up her sleeves with some string. Anything to make it a little easier to move, right? She said. Thank you, ma'am, Mao Mao said. Would you like me to go instead, Mao Mao? Tao Mei offered. No, thank you, Lady Tao Mei. I have a better grasp of the situation. Tao Mei was blind in one eye, which would make it hard for her to navigate all the potential hazards in the forest. Now you listen to me, Bassan, his mother said to him. Make sure you protect Mao Mao. Yes, ma'am. He didn't know what was going on, but he could sense the tension in the air. Okay, we're off, said Tianyu, who seemed the least concerned of all of them considering it might be his home on fire. Guess that's a hunter for you. Once in the woods, it was hard to see where the sun was. Mao Mao was afraid they would get lost if they let their attention slip. The ground was soft, thick with leaves. She picked her way along, trying not to lose her footing. Tianyu tromped ahead, getting ever farther away from her. You're too slow, Bassan said, and clasped Mao Mao around the middle. Whoa, she cried. What was going on here? Oh, 4. He was carrying her like a sack of wheat or rice. It was by no means a dignified mode of conveyance, nonetheless, they moved considerably faster than with Mao Mao walking. At least they managed not to lose sight of Tianyu. How can you find your way without the sun? Bassan asked, the same question Mao Mao had. There's some real big trees in this forest, hundreds of years old, Tianyu said. Hunters use them as markers. I had to learn which tree was where. It was true, they did occasionally see huge trees. We're almost there, Tianyu said and came to a halt. The smoke they had seen was indeed coming from a house. A disquieting scene lay before them. Jinchi had been right that the young folk had wanted to get violent. Bassan was furious. What in the world is this? It was impossible to ignore what they saw. A middle-aged man, a hunter to judge by his attire, was being confronted by several younger men in fashionable outfits. One of them grinned and leveled his sword at the man. Oh, it's my dad, Tianyu said. He was about to trot right out when Mao Mao stopped him. Wait a second, she said. Why? If you go out there, you'll only make things worse. Let's let Master Bassan handle this. Not that it's a lot more reassuring to send him in, she thought, but it was better than Tianyu. What do you think you're doing? Bassan demanded, approaching with a series of long strides. Mao Mao watched from the safety of the trees. The young man with his sword pointed at the hunter turned. Well, if it isn't Master Bassan, he said. Isn't it obvious? We're clearing out the bandits. Bandit? Is that what he is? Bassan still didn't know the situation. No. He's a local hunter, Mao Mao called. You heard her. So why are you burning his house and threatening him? You'll sing a different tune when you see this. The young man grinned even more broadly and tossed something on the ground. It was half of a broken jade tablet. Almost identical to Joka's, but the damage to it was different. I knew it. Joka's father had been a member of Tianyu's family. For some reason, he'd broken the jade in half and given it to her mother. This jade tablet once belonged to someone who laid hands on an imperial prince in violation of taboo, and it proves this man is a criminal. Supposedly, the prince was poisoned and then carved into pieces. But that fiend's descendants are alive and well. Something wrong with that, wouldn't you say? I don't think that's quite how the story goes. Mao Mao had heard that the emperor's favorite son had died of illness, and that Kata had been punished for doing an autopsy on the corpse. Was the tale twisted in the telling over generations? People loved to embellish stories. The version that came down from the physicians was the truth, and it accorded with the version Jinchi knew. The house was on fire. Could the blaze be seen from the woods? Knowing Jinchi, he would come running if he sensed anything amiss. The young man went on, he used Zhen poison to do the deed. There was a feast, and he dipped one of the bird's feathers in the prince's drink when no one was looking. Worse, he tried to become the prince by skinning his corpse and wearing the skin to an audience with the emperor. It's only too obvious that the offspring of such a creature would be monsters themselves. Wait. When they said there would be Zhen birds, was this what they meant? Mao Mao couldn't keep the scowl off her face. They must think they're very clever, but I'm not laughing. She kicked the ground like a wild boar about to charge. Basin, in contrast, froze. He had no idea what they were talking about. Mao Mao felt bad about it, but neither she nor Jinchi had shared this information with him. He looked at her as if to ask what was going on. Oh. I can explain that, Tianyu said, about to step forward again. Mao Mao kicked him in the shin and stepped up instead. That's wrong, she said. She had to. It killed her that they'd used the metaphor of the mythical Zhen. Who the hell are you? The young man spat. Mao Mao didn't remember people's faces, no matter what family they were from. Instead, remembering that Jinchi had said this hunt involved named clans, she decided on a leading question. It would seem you don't remember me. Weren't we introduced at the meeting of the named? She gave an exaggeratedly polite bow. Oh. One of the youngsters seemed to have figured it out. Now that she got a better look, she recognized him as a soldier she sometimes saw. He'd even been to the medical office. Wait, it was Mr. Love Letters from the Shin clan. Him again. Was he ever not up to no good? Mao Mao really felt for the mistress of the Shin clan. If Mr. Love Letters seemed a bit meek today, it was probably because the human bear i.e., Basin was standing there. The prince didn't die from poison, but of illness, Mao Mao said. And he wasn't carved up and skinned, his corpse was autopsied. She struggled to maintain her composure. Frankly, she would have liked nothing better than to fling horse dung at these kids, but she refrained. Autopsied? That's an awful thing to do to someone, said Basin, clearly shaken. His simplicity was at once a blessing and a curse. So that's how they got away with surviving so long, the first young man said. They took up carving up animals for a living. Tianyu's father caught his breath. He looked every inch the hunter, from his simple, sturdy clothing, easy to move in, to his bear-like beard and tanned skin. He looked nothing like Tianyu. As if you lot don't eat meat. Mao Mao snapped, finally unable to restrain herself. Hey, careful, Basin said, frowning at her. Listen to you talk, Niang Niang. Tianyu chirped. For some reason, he was smiling. Maybe it didn't bother him to see his father all but crawling on the ground at sword point? Speaking of Tianyu's father, he appeared to have noticed Tianyu, but was keeping up a careful facade so the young folks wouldn't realize it. He'd also sensed something else at work, and kept his head carefully lowered, as if to involve himself as little as possible. You say something, girl, the young man growled. No. Nothing at all, Mao Mao replied, trying to play dumb. She went over and picked up the jade tablet. It's the same. The same as Joka's. The passage of time had worn the edges down, but she suspected it would fit the break in Joka's tablet perfectly. He may have been a criminal, but he was a man of quite high station to begin with, wasn't he? Mao Mao asked. Maybe so, but a criminal is a criminal. His depravity ran deep, and his horrifying personality must have been passed on to his children and grandchildren. Mao Mao looked hard at the tablet. The young folks didn't seem to know that its owner had originally been a member of the imperial family. Only to his children and grandchildren, she asked. Haha. Their ancestors probably had something wrong with them too. We all heard you. You can't back out now. Mao Mao held the jade tablet high. You heard him. What do you think? Good question, said a voice as beautiful as flowing water. It was a bit of an affectation by the owner, she'd heard it many times in the rear palace. I guess I might be a problem as well. The voice spoke with deliberate slowness, implying a gentle question. Then the owner appeared from the far side of the grove. Moon Prince, the young men exclaimed and bowed their heads. Jinshi wore almost the same unctuous smile he'd used during his time as a eunuch. The difference was, he was no longer as perfect as a heavenly nymph. On his right cheek there was a scar, and his smile took on an edge of contempt as he looked at the ne'er-do-wells. You said that tablet proves him to be a criminal, Jinshi said. Yes, sir, one of the young men answered. The legendary poisonous birds you spoke of, were you referring to that criminal's offspring? Yes, sir. They come from the loins of one who victimized an august imperial prince. If they're allowed to continue to possess this tablet, who knows when they might decide to try to bend the country to their will. It's our suggestion that they be dealt with promptly. You, Moon Prince, the second most revered person in this land, are the perfect one to do it. Second most revered person in the land, huh? They would never have said such a thing at the palace. Jinshi was the imperial younger brother, and the second most revered person in the land was the emperor's son, the current heir apparent. Jinshi smiled, but only with his lips. My land does not permit the death penalty. Yes, but surely it's important to nip bad buds before they grow? Besides, at this moment, it would be simple to separate this man's head from his shoulders at a word from you. We called you to this hunt so that we could give this scoundrel into your hands. Tianyu's father was simply bearing all of this. Hang in there just a little longer, Mao Mao thought. She herself had been chased by bandits and nearly murdered, so she understood very well the terror, the feeling that one's heart might shatter from the tension or a hole open in one's stomach. Ha ha ha. I see, so it's not only the children and grandchildren, but all the intervening generations who are criminals. Jinshi walked over to them, reaching into his robes as he did so. Behind him came the smiling Hulun and his usual bodyguard, as well as a few other young people who looked distinctly uncomfortable. Mao Mao took them to be other members of the named clans. Jinshi walked past Tianyu's father, walked past the muttering crowd of young people, and stopped in front of Mao Mao. Then, from his robes, he took out a jade tablet identical to the one she was holding. What's that?" exclaimed the young men, their faces going tight. Jinshi took the half of the tablet that Mao Mao held and put it together with the half he was holding as she had expected. They fit perfectly. As you can see, I was already aware of this criminal's existence. Do you know why I did not see fit to punish him? His gaze pierced the impetuous young men who had taken it upon themselves to do this thing. His ancestor was already punished. Surely there is no need for the punishment to go down to the children and the grandchildren. Still holding the two halves of the tablet together, Jinshi showed it to the young men. If you still insist on tracing his guilt back up the family tree, then know that I, too, am guilty. He put his hand to his chest theatrically. This criminal of yours was once a member of the imperial family. He shares the same ancestor as me. There was disdain in his eyes as he made this declaration. The young men had wanted the death penalty. They may even have believed that this would make Jinshi happy. It only showed how little they knew of Jinshi as a man. I suppose few people do. Jinshi's personality was not as beautiful as his appearance might suggest. Indeed, he could be quite melancholy. He was serious-minded and a hard worker, and precisely because he was so attractive himself, he did not judge others by their appearances. He placed a hand on the shoulder of Tianyu's father, who had remained with head bowed throughout the entire conversation. My subordinates overstepped themselves. You have my humblest apologies. You owe me no apology, sir, the other man said. I ask for nothing and wish for nothing. If my family is a hindrance to you, I am the last of my line. Please, be rid of me so that I might not stand in the way of your plans. Tianyu's father still did not raise his head. Jinchi was of such vaunted status that he didn't dare. Now, we can't have that, Tianyu finally broke in. Come on, Dad. It hurts to hear you say that stuff. Don't talk like that. Come on. Tianyu's father shot him a look that said, keep your mouth shut, idiot. Moon Prince, are you going to punish me? Tianyu asked. Have I a reason to? Jinchi replied. No, I don't think so. Tianyu stood boldly. So can I ask you to guarantee you'll safeguard my and my father's lives? You need not even ask. Also, would it be possible to do something about our burning house? The entire forest will catch at this rate. Jinchi glanced an instruction at Hulun, who grinned and turned to the young men. All right, let's get that fire put out. You started this blaze, you can extinguish it. What's he blathering about? Mao Mao snorted and went over to Tianyu's father. Tianyu might be a doctor, but he had no interest in anything other than surgery. If anyone was going to check the man over, it would have to be her. Tianyu's father was obviously relieved, but he still wasn't exactly relaxed. Shall we move to the tent? Mao Mao asked. Yes, let's, Jinchi replied. With his approval, she got ready to go. But before that... Ugh! It turns out there were no poison birds after all. Mao Mao felt like a guttering candle. Oh, hey, Niang Niang. What? She snapped. She didn't have the energy to pretend to play nice with Tianyu right now. I don't know about any poison birds, but we've got this book at home. It's supposed to be by this guy named Kata. What? Mao Mao looked at the house which was on fire. You're into that kind of thing, right, Niang Niang? Mao Mao grabbed a bucket from one of the young men hauling water. Hey, what are you doing? He cried. Give me that. Mao Mao emptied the bucket over her head and made a beeline for the burning house. Jinchi grabbed her. What's wrong with you? Let me go, please. There's a treasure in there, a priceless treasure. Give it up. It must be ash by now. Mao Mao, sopping wet and dripping snot, reached vainly toward the burning house. Isn't that Grand Commandant Kan's daughter? She heard someone ask. Blood will out, I guess, someone else said. She didn't even have the heart to deny it. Chapter 19, The Still Hidden Treasure, Part 1. Dr. Li gave first aid to Tianyu's father. He had the wound on his neck and some scratches from when he had tripped on the ground, but otherwise he wasn't seriously harmed. In fact, Mao Mao was in worse shape than he was. Her face was a mess of soot and snot and tears. Her clothes were soaked. The moment she got back to the tent, Suiren quickly gave her a new outfit, which went a long way toward making her feel more human again. Kata's book, huh? She'd hardly believed it really existed. When Kokoyo had mentioned it in the pleasure district, she'd thought how great it would be if it existed, but she hadn't really believed it. What fine medical treatment you're giving me for such small injuries. I really can't thank you enough. It turned out that Tianyu's father was his exact opposite, not only in appearance, but in personality. Despite being a grizzled hunter, he was polite and oddly classy. Please, don't mention it, said Dr. Li. Awful lot of work when you could just slap some spit on it and it would be fine, Tianyu said from beside him, as if they weren't dealing with his own father. He earned himself a knuckle from Dr. Li. Oh. Pardon me. I know he's your son, the doctor said quickly to Tianyu's father. Not at all. Knock him on the head until it cracks open. Tianyu's father sounded distinctly serious. When it does, I'll be curious to see if there's anything inside. With Dr. Li's jokes, it could be hard to tell whether he was actually, joking. Ha ha ha. Gee, it almost sounds like you all don't like me, Tianyu said. Mao Mao and the others were in one of the tents that Hulun had prepared. It served as a place for the guards to rest, and had medical supplies as well. Basin, who had apparently been waiting for the conversation to reach a break, stuck his head in. May we? He asked. Please, go ahead, Mao Mao answered for the group. Basin, Jinchi, and Hulun all entered. What do you want me to do? Dr. Li asked. He'd been brought along for his skills as a physician, but he was an outsider to this group. He took the hint and offered to make himself scarce. Please wait outside, Jinchi instructed him. Yes, sir. Dr. Li left the tent, leaving Mao Mao, Tianyu's father, Jinchi, Basin, and Hulun. In Mao Mao's opinion, they didn't really need those last two either. Moon Prince, we don't need Hulun here, do we? She asked, the clear suggestion being, get him the hell out of here. Jinchi had described Hulun as Lahan with a different hair color and Mao Mao intended to treat him like Lahan. That's a terrible thing to say, Lady Mao Mao, Hulun said, still grinning broadly. Basin didn't look much happier than Mao Mao felt he didn't seem to get along with the young man either. You'll just have to live with them, Jinchi said. If that was his decision, Mao Mao wouldn't press the point. Then Jinchi turned to Tianyu's father and said, First, you must let me apologize. Oh, no, sir. Heavens, no. Tianyu's father only bowed his head even deeper. He didn't stop there, he got out of his chair and prostrated himself directly on the carpet. I can only thank you for having any regard at all for the descendant of a criminal like myself. In my filthy state, I'm not fit even to appear in your presence. You don't have to worry about that. For the record, let me ask, are you in fact Tianyu's father? Mao Mao had the same question. Yes, sir. I take after my mom, see, Tianyu volunteered. A crude thought crossed Mao Mao's mind, maybe you take after your dad but it's not this guy, but she didn't let it out of her mouth. Not for Tianyu's sake, but for his father's. I have a lot of questions I'd like to ask you, Jinchi said. You are a descendant of Kata, are you not? Yes, sir. My great-grandmother became intimate with a physician who visited our hunting grounds. When she got pregnant, he gave her this jade tablet, or so they say. All eyes settled on the tablet. After that, though, the physician earned the wrath of the reigning emperor and was put to death. If anyone had known my great-grandmother was pregnant, the child in her belly and perhaps the entire family would have been killed with him. With tears in her eyes, my great-grandmother defaced the tablet so that the design could not be discerned. If you ask me, she should have just gotten rid of it, but I guess she couldn't. Maybe it just goes to show how much she cared about that physician. How did it come to be broken in two? That's my older brother's doing. Our great-grandmother kept the jade, careful not to let anyone know about it but unable to get rid of it. My brother, however, he said something about an imperial treasure being hidden somewhere, and tried to make off with it. Our father wouldn't allow it. He said that as his younger brother, I too had a claim on the jade. So finally, my brother broke the tablet in half and disappeared with one piece of it. Tianyu's father looked at Jinchi's half of the jade tablet, mystified. But what is it doing here? Mao Mao raised her hand. Allow me to answer that. About 30 years ago, a courtesan in the royal capital gave birth to a child, and she received the tablet from the customer who was its father. She gave birth to a girl and passed the tablet down to her, but for reasons I won't bore you with, I've entrusted it to the Moon Prince. I see, Tianyu's father gazed at the stone, deeply moved. Would you like to meet the woman? Mao Mao knew this suggestion wasn't strictly necessary, but offered it anyway. They didn't know what had happened to Tianyu's father's older brother, but the woman in question would be Tianyu's father's niece. No, I suppose it's better if I don't, Tianyu's father said. Ah, but I want to. She's my cousin, isn't she? Tianyu whined, but he was roundly ignored except by his father, who, in the absence of Dr. Li, planted a knuckle on his head. Fate works in strange ways, Jinshi said, his fingers brushing the face of the tablet. Now that the two parts were joined together, the defacement could be seen as a jagged line down the stone. It seemed somehow odd to Mao Mao, who studied the tablet intently. We'll compensate you for your injuries and the loss of your house, Jinshi went on. I think some of the money can come from the fools who caused all this trouble to begin with. I wouldn't feel right putting you to such effort, Tianyu's father said. Instead, maybe I could ask you for just one thing. What would you like? Tianyu's father heaved a sigh before he spoke. I would ask you to find the hidden treasure my older brother was seeking and destroy it. For a second, Mao Mao couldn't comprehend what he was saying. The words hidden treasure kept echoing in her mind and then her body moved of its own volition. A hidden treasure, she said, her eyes shining. Could it be? Could it be that you're talking about Kata's book? That's right. She raced up to Tianyu's father. All right, slow down, Jinshi said, grabbing her by the collar like he was scruffing a cat. I thought the book burned in the fire, Mao Mao said, managing to ask the question even as she kicked her feet in the air. No, we don't know where this treasure is. My great-grandmother appears to have hidden it, but it was nowhere in the house that we could find. However, in her last will, which she left us along with the jade, she said that if it looked like the book was going to fall into the hands of the uncomprehending, we were to burn it. Which is why Uncle left, right? Tianyu piped up. You be quiet, his father said. Another knuckle. Even if they found Kata's book, it would be treated as a forbidden text. Yet the medical knowledge within it might be invaluable. Jinshi cautiously set Mao Mao down and asked Tianyu's father, do you know any place or object that might serve as a clue? Not to speak of, I'm afraid. Except, I've heard that my great-grandmother never traveled very far. She hid it nearby, then. Jinshi pondered. Basin appeared to be thinking as well. Tianyu's head whipped from side to side as he observed each of them. Hulun seemed to have a thought. He stepped out of the tent but was soon back. How widely did your great-grandmother range? He asked. He was carrying a map of the area. It showed rivers and forests and several villages nearby. She had passed by the time I have any memories, but I talked about her with my brother a number of times. I don't think she would have gone farther than this. Tianyu's father pointed to a particular part of the forest and the nearby village. I assume she went to sell the pelts and meat of the game the family hunted, and to do what shopping she needed. Mao Mao asked. I think so, yes. Judging by the woman's last words, it seemed unlikely she had wandered very far from where she lived her life. If she hid the thing close to home, where would it be? Mao Mao gazed at the jade tablet. What is it? Jinshi asked. If I may. She placed the two pieces of the tablet on top of the map. Together they made a long rectangle, and the ratio of its length to its width was roughly the same as the ratio of the forest's north-south and east-west axes. Mao Mao looked again at the scratches that ran along the tablet. They cut side to side diagonally. The pattern had bothered her for some time now. Could it be? Do you have a brush? She asked. But of course. Hulun held a brush out to her, and she snatched it from him. There are large trees in this forest, right? She said. She was thinking of the trees Tianyu had used as guideposts. Yes, ma'am, said Tianyu's father. And they've all been there for centuries, right? What are you getting at? Basin asked, confused. Show me where those trees are. Since they used the trees as guideposts through the forest, they ought to have a good idea of their location. Very well. Tianyu's father started pointing out the locations, and Mao Mao circled them on the map. I think that's all of them, he said after a while. Mao Mao lined the tablet up on top of the map and calculated the ratio of the length to the width, then drew a line between the two corresponding circles. The length, ratio, and the angle match, she said. She drew a diagonal line, one that neatly matched the scratch on the tablet. Once she had drawn in all of the scratches, only one circle remained. Who knew? Jinshi murmured. No one, as long as the tablet remained broken in two. The tablet itself had been the key. The surface hadn't simply been effaced, the scratches had been meant to serve a purpose. This purpose. Now we know where we need to go. Mao Mao grabbed the map and headed out of the tent. Chapter 20, The Hidden Treasure, Part 2. Mao Mao, her eyes sparkling, was being carried by Jinshi like a sack of rice, no less. How did this happen? She thought. She'd wanted to get to the spot on the map as fast as humanly possible, so she had asked Basin to carry her. I'm not sure about that, Basin had said. To be fair, even Mao Mao found the idea a bit embarrassing, and normally she wouldn't have suggested it. But this was an emergency. Shouldn't they be trying to get the treasure just as fast as they could? Finally Basin had said, I guess we have to do what we have to do, and had made to pick Mao Mao up, when a hand had reached out to stop him. I'll bring her. It was Jinshi. Thus Mao Mao had ended up slung ignominiously over his shoulder. Master Jinshi, Mao Mao said. No one was close enough to hear them, so she didn't bother to call him Moon Prince. Do you think this is any way to carry a person? I don't. Then why am I being carried this way? Jinshi pouted for a moment before replying, I'm not supposed to touch you too much, am I? He'd chosen the means of carrying her that minimized the amount of physical contact between them. You can't make babies just by touching a girl. Damn it, I know that. Here I am trying to be delicate, don't just go and say it. Understood, sir. Jinshi might be in a sullen mood, but Mao Mao could tell he was taking care that she not be jostled around too much. There were only so many options here, so she resigned herself to the life of a sack of rice. Thanks to Jinshi's porterage, they soon reached their destination. The centuries-old tree would have required at least 3 of Mao Mao to reach around its entire trunk. You really think it's here? Tianyu asked, yawning. Could he be any more disinterested? If you're going to hide something, the base of a tree is a pretty standard place, Mao Mao replied. Physical labor? That's what Basin was there for. He took a shovel and started digging. The ground was covered in soft leaf mold, but the deeper he went, the harder the earth became. Nothing yet, Tianyu's father said. No, and he's already dug an entire circuit around the tree, Mao Mao agreed. Hey, don't you think it could be somewhere else? Tianyu chirped. As they made their respective remarks, Basin kept digging. Suddenly he gasped and tossed the shovel aside, digging in the ground with his bare hands. Mao Mao tried to help, but the soil was so tough that she couldn't make any headway. Is this it? Basin asked. He held up what at first looked like a rock or a clump of earth, but when he gave it a shake, it turned out to be hollow. It's encased in clay, Mao Mao said. What came next was not what Basin was here for. Mao Mao took a wooden mallet and gently tapped the clay, being careful not to damage what was within. Bit by bit, the casing fell away, revealing a jar with a sealed mouth. Inside was a book. Mao Mao gasped and reached out for it, but Jinshi took it, jar and all. What are you doing? Mao Mao demanded. If you touch it now, you'll only damage it. Maybe destroy it, Jinshi said. At that, Mao Mao went pale. The book did exist, as promised, but the pages were stuck together from the humidity. If someone carelessly tried to pry them apart, they would become unreadable. Is this the treasure? Tianyu's father asked. He looked reverently at the book but made no attempt to touch it. It no longer belongs to me. Are you sure about that? Mao Mao asked. Yes. It's enough for me to know that the treasure my brother was looking for really existed. Tianyu's father seemed to have changed his thinking drastically on account of his brother. He'd attempted to restrain his own son in order to keep a strict distance from the imperial family and not to repeat the crime of autopsy that their predecessor had committed. What irony that his attitude had ultimately caused Tianyu to leave the household and become an accomplished surgeon, if not necessarily an ethical paragon. Tianyu's father might have had a few choice words for his son, but Tianyu had none for his dad. If this had been a stage drama, this would have been the perfect time for an emotional reunion, but it wasn't, and no tear-jerking father-son bonding moment ensued. That was simply who Tianyu was, most likely. I guess every family has their own circumstances. A great weight had been lifted from the shoulders of Tianyu's father to know that he would not be punished, let alone executed. Even as all this passed through Mao Mao's mind, she never once took her eyes off the battered book. "Master Jinchi," she said. "Yes, what? What are you going to do with that book?" "I think I'll have it repaired by a craftsman with tight lips. May I be the first to see it when it's done? I can't promise you'll be the first, but if it does turn out to be about medicine, I'll let you have a look." Mao Mao clenched her fist. Talk about something to look forward to. She practically skipped all the way back. Chapter 21, The Road Home. And so, a packed day ended. "Why am I here, again?" Dr. Li asked. He'd tended to Tianyu's father and then spent the rest of the time waiting around. At least he'd gotten to do something. As for the young men who had deemed it a good deed to murder an innocent huntsman, they would have some self-reflection to do. Given that they had bumped heads with the imperial younger brother himself, it would probably be a while before they could hope to rise through the ranks. Mr. Love Letters, or whoever he was, might finally find himself properly disinherited. The hunt ended with all the other participants still somewhat mystified as to what had happened. They might have felt all dressed up with nowhere to go, but Mao Mao was supremely satisfied. I wonder what could be in that book. Her heart was pounding so hard that she wasn't thinking clearly. So when Suiren said, "Mao Mao, you're in this carriage on the way home," Mao Mao simply replied, "Yes, ma'am," and got in. Silence immediately reigned. A gorgeous nobleman sat in the vehicle and no one else. It appeared to be just the two of them. They both went quiet without quite meaning to. "That old lady set us up." In the past, Mao Mao might have felt the more awkward of the two of them, but right now Jinchi looked considerably more ill at ease than she did. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Lady Suiren instructed me to board this carriage," Mao Mao said, sitting down. This was a conveyance for an imperial family member, meaning the comfort level was night and day compared to the vehicle she'd been in on the way here. "Feel free to help yourself, Mao Mao," Suiren said, handing in a drink. It was fruit juice with pieces of ice floating in it. "There's more if you want it," she advised, and then left the carriage. "She's thought of everything." Mao Mao let her shoulders slump a bit in a rather unladylike manner. "You're certainly making yourself at home," Jinchi remarked. "Pardon me, sir," Mao Mao said, straightening up. "No, it's fine. You can relax." Jinchi gave the glass of fruit juice a shake, rattling the ice inside, then set it on the built-in table. The table even had a depression for the glasses, so that they wouldn't spill while the carriage was moving. Maybe this whole thing had been custom-made. "You were right, Master Jinchi. Those hunters were up to no good. I can't imagine why they thought I would be pleased with such a thing." He heaved a sigh. "I think they just don't have any idea what would please you." Mao Mao sipped her juice. "You spent years and years pretending to be a eunuch, never showing yourself in public, right? And even once you stopped pretending, you were immediately buried under a mountain of work, largely scorned banquets and feasts, and if someone did succeed in engaging you in conversation, you just gave them that slimy smile to put them off, so they never got a chance to actually know you." "Slimy?" Jinchi pursed his lips. "Then you spent an entire year in the western capital. It's no surprise if they don't know who you are." I'm sure they heard of your suppression of the Shi clan, and decided you must be vicious like a hawk. The young men they had met today didn't know this Jinchi, the one who could pout like a child. Although I do wonder who gave them the idea that Jinchi would appreciate an extrajudicial murder. She was definitely curious about where that story had come from. On that subject, Master Jinchi, there's something I'm wondering about. Yes? What? Are these little skirmishes within the military really what you could call factional strife? I've had the same question. Those young men earlier hadn't been thinking very deeply, they had been following their emotions. This hadn't been about ideals or convictions. I think we need to investigate where those guys heard about Kata's descendants. I think you're right. I'll have my most capable subordinate attend to it. Jinchi lapped at his juice. It wasn't the most refined way to behave, but Mao Mao wasn't exactly going out of her way to be ladylike either. She could at least kick back and do what she wanted when that old biddy wasn't around. I see you went racing ahead again, Jinchi said. You couldn't wait until I got back. He was referring to when she had made a beeline for Tianyu's father's burning house. You think that was too far ahead, sir? Under the circumstances, I assumed we should try to get there as fast as possible. Lady Suiren said it was okay, and with Master Basin to guard me, I'd have been more worried about the other guys. Basin was a member of a named clan, and he was tremendously strong. Even other named clans people wouldn't be able to make any false moves with him around. Most importantly, he intimidated Mr. Love Letters. Yes, I'm aware of that, but you need to watch out for yourself, Mao Mao. This past year has somewhat diminished the menace of the freak strategist. Yet? So what? I've got no intention of hiding behind that old fart's menace, Mao Mao replied, with a look of profound distaste. Still, these days she was willing to make use of him when it proved convenient, so perhaps she had softened in her own way. Knowing that freak, he'll have them all whipped into shape again soon enough. Besides, if what happened today becomes public knowledge, I should think it would put an end to the overenthusiastic squabbling of these little soldiers. These young men might prove the perfect example, in her opinion. Don't you think you should make yourself a little more visible to the people around you, Master Jinchi? She asked. If it's going to get me involved with every hot-headed troublemaker at court, I'd rather not. Mao Mao observed that Jinchi's cup was empty, and poured him more juice. There aren't that many people to whom I need to be visible, he said. Jinchi gazed at Mao Mao, then gently reached toward her. He looked like he was going to take her hand, but he stopped just short. You're not going to touch me, sir? Mao Mao asked, and he looked awkward. I want to. More than that. I want to hold you close, as tight as I can. And yet you don't, she said teasingly. This from the man who had never hesitated to put his hands on her no matter how many times she told him not to. Then again, lately, he'd almost seemed to avoid her, if anything. Even when he'd been hauling her around like a sack of rice earlier that day. I'm holding back. Otherwise I fear I won't be able to control myself. You won't, sir. No. It won't stop at holding you close. I'd bite you, I'd lick you. A chill just went down my spine. Mao Mao gave him a mild glower. She had goosebumps. That was the pronouncement of a straight-up freak, even if he could probably get away with it on account of being so handsome. If La Han were to say something like that, she wouldn't stop at crushing his toes, she'd stab them through with a spear. Now, that is rude, Jinchi said, but he didn't look angry, just a bit resentful. Then, since I'm already being rude, Mao Mao said, suddenly finding she wanted to tweak him a bit. She drank down her juice, but then she ran a finger along the condensation on the glass. She took her damp finger and placed it on Jinchi's wrist. He choked and froze. She felt his wrist twitch. She let her finger trace a path from his wrist down the back of his hand until it slid along his middle finger, leaving a gleaming trail like a snail had passed by. Finally she pressed lightly on the nail of his middle finger and pulled away. You? He grumbled. Yes, sir, she asked innocently. You may think apothecary is your vocation, but I think you'd make a better courtesan than one might suspect. Mao Mao pursed her lips. Is that supposed to be a compliment? Jinji, meanwhile, was anxiously looking anywhere but at her. Maybe it was a little too soon for that sort of tease, she thought. The carriage had only just set off, and they would have to endure the awkward atmosphere all the way back to the capital. Epilogue, those who sow malice. Chao hummed as she trotted through the palace. It wasn't that she had no job to do. It was simply that, as she no longer had the steady work of being the Moon Prince's lady-in-waiting, her days somehow felt as full of free time as they did full of business. Chao's current job was to pinpoint the source of the dark rumors going around court. There was some kind of plot afoot. Although people probably assumed that it was some grand scheme, the biggest blazes could start from the smallest sparks. In this world, a great business could be sunk because of some silly story spread by children. The more nervous people became, the more easily they could be misled by such wild tales. She'd seen it happen many times in the western capital. Chao liked to see people cornered. No, liked wasn't quite the right word. The more frenzied people around her became, the more she could watch them with cool detachment. It was a boon, she thought, to be impervious to such chaos. It really helped with getting by. Now cool, impervious Chao was heading for the soldiers' training ground. She almost skipped along, letting her right hand dangle at her side, as she looked for one person in particular. She saw the soldiers resting. Here, have some water. The person who held out a bamboo canteen to them was awfully slim for a military man. He looked weak, a hanger-on if she'd ever seen one. He was attending to the other soldiers. Weak creatures had their own way of surviving, as Chao knew very well. She herself was the weakest of the weak. But even the weak could survive. Sometimes, they survived because they were weak. The proverb held that the strong inevitably ate the weak, but that only meant that carnivores needed the pliant herbivores to live. The herbivores, on the other hand, could go on perfectly well without the carnivores. When the sycophant had finished giving out water and provisions, he moved off to somewhere else. She'd heard from the soldiers that the water the man prepared was cold and delicious, and the snacks were perfect for a break between intense bouts of training. Sure, sometimes there was someone who didn't like the food and gave the man a whack, but nobody beat him too severely. Without their weak little creature, training would only be harder, not just for the one who attacked him, but for everyone, so there was strong social pressure to leave him alone. Chao followed the weak thing. He went to a well some distance from the training area. It was fed not by a river, but by underground water, and it was colder and clearer than other wells. It was just far enough away that few other soldiers bothered to use it. May I have a moment, my dear Jun? Chao drawled. How can I help you? Oh, and you can call me June. May I work while we talk? Oh yes, that's just fine. As his name implied, Jun was a member of the Yu clan, but the clan leader had forbidden him from using the character Yu. Everyone simply called him June. His father had been the clan's leader, but had fallen from grace. His younger sister had been brought up in luxury as a princess of the Yu clan, but she'd messed with the lady of the main family line, and now she was effectively under house arrest. That left just Jun, and he'd been spared only in order to serve as an example to others. He was a member of one of the named clans, but a failure. He was a failure, but a member of one of the named clans. He was like the bat proverbially said to be neither bird nor beast. Jun had been appointed a bureaucrat by his father's influence, and now that his father had no influence, Jun had been made a soldier. It was almost unthinkable, under normal circumstances, but one could tell how his superiors felt from the way he'd been treated. They seemed to hope he would simply cry uncle and give up. But Jun did not give up. He was simply too weak to become anyone's real enemy. The fact that he wasn't a threat put would-be aggressors at ease. They might ridicule him, but it was a kind of trust. So no one would imagine that in the lightly salted jerky and chilled water was poison. Which, of course, there wasn't. His poison was of a different kind. Jun, are you familiar with a man named Wang Feng? Chao asked. Yes, I know him. A soldier who liked his jerky. He was handsome. I remember how often I saw him chatting with ladies in waiting. Are you aware that he's dead? Still Chao kept her words drawled. Yes, the story's very well known. I gather he was hanged in Grand Commandant Kan's office. I must say I was shocked. Dejun continued to fill the canteen with well water as he spoke. What kind of chats did you have with Wang Feng? Inconsequential ones. I simply told him that I ended up where I am because of what my father and my younger sister did. So you talked to him about your family business? Yes. I'm not a man with any hobbies to speak of. I don't have many topics of conversation besides my family and my work. A great big grin spread across Ijun's face. Chao grinned right back at him. She was sure now, she and he were the same kind of creature. In that case, have you ever seen the dragon statue that was at the Yu family's house? Dragon statue? You know, I have a vague memory of something like that. I think I caught glimpses of the clan leader looking at it from time to time. And did you happen to share those recollections with Wang Feng? That's also very vague. Dejun was a weak creature. Stronger ones would sometimes put creatures like him to the test by demanding an amusing story. One always had to be ready with a supply of intriguing rumors. Weak, a flatterer, always keeping his ears open. He was like a rabbit, this man. Oddly enough, all the young soldiers who have been causing such a commotion lately are people you spend a lot of time looking after. You know how it is. Young blood runs so hot, he said as if he weren't young himself. It does, it does. Young people's passions are always looking for an outlet. Sometimes it's an appetite for food, sometimes for women. Sometimes for power. I can't say it makes any sense to me. Dejun remained resolute in acting as if it had nothing to do with him. Well, the other day it finally got out of hand. Someone invited that unreachable figure, handsome but impregnable, impossible to tell what he's thinking. They invited the imperial younger brother on a hunt. I heard. And I could hardly believe it. I heard they attacked an innocent huntsman and tried to execute him as a criminal. They thought it was what the Moon Prince wanted. I just don't understand what they were thinking. Why put a hunter to death? Chao mused. Dejun continued drawing water. It seems this hunter was a descendant of someone who had harmed the imperial family, and they thought the Moon Prince would be pleased if they punished him, Chao went on. My goodness, can you imagine trying to punish someone for a crime committed generations ago? Of course the Moon Prince never wanted that. So I wonder, who could have put such an idea in their heads? Too many people just pull ahead once they get a notion in their minds. Too true, too true. Chao cocked her head and watched Dejun draw the water. It was you who incited them, wasn't it? Whatever do you mean? Dejun put a lid on the bamboo canteen. Oh, just a rumor. A rumor that says there's a family out there that once lured a member of the imperial family to their death. It goes on to say that they're filthy huntsmen now, and that the Moon Prince can't forgive what they did. May I assume you were the source of that rumor, my dear Dejun? That's a very broad interpretation of what I said, Dejun replied, though he didn't deny that the story had come from him. I simply overheard some pale-faced physicians talking about some taboo. Don't you think it's possible a rumor that was already circulating got mixed in with what I said? In that case, do you know who told them exactly where to find this hunter? I said nothing about a location. But a clan of criminals has every reason to fear the imperial family. I may have suggested that if a hunter rebuffed a request from the court to use his hunting grounds, it would be somewhat suspicious. Chao had to admire Dejun's commitment to pretending not to be involved. She was sure that he had spread other rumors in other places as well. Just the words of a weakling. Thus this bat-like man, neither bird nor beast, had lit the smallest sparks within the military. Who would ever believe that this weakest of all creatures was the source of the factional strife that had engulfed the army? Why did you spread those rumors? Chao asked him. Oh, no real reason. But anyone who knew their own weakness ought to have understood there are things that are appropriate to do, and things that are not. It was said with the slightest touch of malice. Dujun didn't specifically resent those in power or their politics. What he couldn't stand were people puffed up with pride because they believed they were strong. Anyway, there are plenty of people who will do anything to get close to the Moon Prince, whether I whisper in their ear or not. For he's so strong and beautiful and diligent. You think he's diligent? Indeed. He would never have spent a whole year in the western capital just for the fun of it. This man, Chao thought, had a good pair of eyes. Besides His Majesty himself, there's only one member of the imperial family who is healthy, and of age, and highly competent, the Moon Prince. And yet, if anything were to happen to the Emperor at this moment, it's the heir apparent who would assume the throne, though he's far too young for it. Which, I suppose, would make his maternal relatives very happy. Hence the rumors, spread mistrust and inflame ambition to control the actions of others. The soldiers had been dancing in this weakling's palm, and they never even knew it. Did you say anything about the Yu clan as well? Chao asked. Nothing specific. Only that the boy adopted by the main house was still so young and innocent. Chao felt a shiver run down her spine. The boy wasn't a secret by any means, he'd even been introduced at the meeting of the named. Yet the leader of the Yu clan was old and sickly. If anything should happen to him, his position would be occupied by a child not even 10 years old. That was the point Ajun wanted to leave in people's minds. It was more than enough to explain why the new faction had gone after the Yu clan of late. You really do hate the Yu clan, don't you? I don't hate them. I just think they were soft on my father, my sister, and me. How much must the family's power be undercut before our leader chases us out? Dujun was twisted. Warped to the roots. There would be no going back for him. What if I told you that you might be punished even though you never laid a hand on that hunter? Rumors are as rumors do, but if they decide you incited the violence, you could still be considered a criminal. Then at least I could finally stop being a soldier. If you want to stop, can't you just quit? I don't have the nerve to quit outright. Not me. Such cowardice was truly unbelievable. If they do punish me, do you think it would extend it to my father and sister? Dujun asked. Eager not to put them to too much trouble. Chao replied. No, I just thought that if I'm going to be kicked out of my family, it might be nice to have them come with me. All of us leaving the mansion together without a coin to our names. Dujun grinned broadly as he spoke. Miss Chao can see you're like her, dear Dujun. They faced the same direction, as it were. Not like Hulun. That made this easy. I happen to hate my family too, you know, Chao said, smiling. She hated the mother who had abandoned her. She balked at the father who had been so busy chasing her mother that he hadn't seen her. She hated the half-brother who had failed because of his misplaced sense of justice. She couldn't have cared less about the half-brother and sister who knew nothing. As for the younger half-brother her mother so doted on, she supposed she would see that he had an accident one of these days. Don't misunderstand, please. I hate my father and my little sister. My mother and my half-sister, I rather like, said Dujun. Well, well. So you like your half-sister? I do. Lady Li Shu, she's rather like a rabbit. She knows her own weakness. Dujun gave an innocent smile. My father refused to acknowledge his weakness. That weakness was what caused him to fail in his business endeavors, which was why he ultimately had to be adopted by the main house even though he already had my mother. It was only the power of the Yu clan that enabled him to succeed in business. Then he got greedy. His stint as an official? He was simply playing at strength. Hence my mother managed the business, and when his wife at the main house passed away, he was able to make my mother his official wife. My mother was not a strong person, yet somehow she managed to oversee the business on her own. And then my father thought to add the burden of being a wife to her load. Word on the street was that Hyuuga was an inspired businessman, but that was all his wife's doing, was it? That's right. And because my younger sister came to the main house when she was so small, she grew up without ever knowing that she was weak. Our father stacked the ranks of the servants with his own people, and shortly thereafter, our mother died. My sister was never more than the spare, yet she tormented the daughter of the main house. Truly, she knew neither herself nor her place. Not that you did anything to stop it. No, because I'm even weaker than my father. Just how self-abasing was this guy? It was getting to the point where it was almost inspiring. I'm like rootless grass, frail and feeble. It's only fitting for me to dry up somewhere and wither away. Chaho considered. Something the matter? Dujun asked. Not really. I just thought, what a waste it would be. What would? You, Dujun. He looked as if he couldn't comprehend what she was saying. I wish you were about 10 years younger, but that natural weakness is a priceless strength. It gives you a stubborn survivability that no one who goes around puffed up with their own power could have. What exactly are you saying? Would you like to be my successor? Dujun's eyes widened at that. Chahu's dominant arm was useless now. It would be faster to find Chahu in the Mi clan's ranks if you started from the bottom. If she wanted to raise her status, then producing usable arms and legs in a hurry would be the quickest way. She had really wished she could have brought the little girl Xiaohong back from the western capital with her, but it had proven impossible. So how about a monster, instead? In the sense that he was very specialized in one particular skill. I don't know what you mean, Dujun said. Oh, it's very simple, she drawled. You only need to keep spreading rumors, just like you've been doing. It's just, now some of them will be things that the higher UPS want people to hear. The higher UPS? You know I'm not precisely full of patriotism, don't you? Dujun was a very direct man, but Chaho could be just as blunt. You don't need to be patriotic or loyal as long as you get something you can't get any other way. Chasing the family you despise from their home, penniless? I can do that before breakfast. I must say, it's an attractive offer. Dujun was clearly intrigued, but Chahu still had to strike the decisive blow. Is there something else you want? She asked. Well, I wouldn't want you to think I'm trying to wipe away my guilt. But what if I said I'd like to give Lady Li Shu back the happiness that I've stolen from her? Would that be feasible? But of course. Chahu laughed. I'll be giving you a lot of lessons from here on out. What a lucky guy, to be instructed by a married woman. Actually, I prefer not to get involved with married women. Far too much baggage. So began a relationship of two scoundrels, teacher and student.